Chapter 297. Rumble. Yin-Yang felt as if a planet had suddenly exploded in his head. Abruptly, Yin-Yang felt as if a planet had exploded in his head. This unforeseen event was too sudden, and they were caught off guard. The violent tremor caused Yin-Yang's 7 orifices to bleed profusely. Thin arrows of blood shot out from all the pores on his body. There seemed to be millions of stars twinkling and spinning in front of him. Yin-Yang landed on the ground with a thud, feeling dizzy from the fall. His mind was not at a loss due to the massive loss of blood. Instead, it was exceptionally clear. Perhaps, it should be said that he felt even more awake. The strength of his deific consciousness seemed to have left Tianxian continent at this very moment as it soared upwards. It reached an immeasurable height, overlooking the heaven and earth. At this instant, his divine sense really seemed to be boundless and vast, and it illuminated the entire universe. He'd really brought the entire world into the scope of his field of vision. Yin-Yang could even feel that he could see that in the boundless ocean, there were terrifying waves that were rising. In the midst of the waves, there was a gigantic fish that was charging up with the boundless sea water. Only half of its head was revealed, but it was already as big as his residence of Yun's yard. In the sky above the boundless ocean, there was a gigantic bird with rainbow-colored feathers soaring and swooping in the sky. When the bird's wings were spread out, it was almost as big as half of Tiantang City. In the next moment, the gigantic body of the fish emerged from the sea. Yin-Yang then realized that the half of its head that was revealed was actually pointed. The body that emerged from the water was unexpectedly huge, like a mountain that soared into the sky. The gigantic bird let out a long cry and swooped down forcefully. Both parties collided violently. In an instant, the turbid waves surged and heaven and earth turned upside down. It was at this moment that Yin-Yang's deific consciousness noticed a silhouette that had suddenly flashed and appeared between the fish and the bird. The person seemed to have sensed something as he turned his head abruptly. A pair of deep eyes met Yin-Yang's deific consciousness. His eyes glowed brightly. Yin-Yang felt a sharp pain in his deific consciousness before it returned to his body involuntarily. However, the shock in his heart was still there. How could this be? My deific consciousness, how could it be? How could there be such a huge fish in this world? Such a big bird? If what he saw was real, then what rank were these fish and bird at? The person who suddenly appeared just now. Who was he? What level was he at? It turns out that this world is so wonderful. What I can see now is merely a corner of it. No, perhaps not even a corner. Yin-Yang sucked in a deep breath. In the future, after uprooting the 4 Seasons Tower and exacting my revenge, I'll carry my brother's wishes and travel the entire continent. I'll walk the universe and peek into Tianxian. The moment he came back to his senses, he felt an itch all over his body. What was going on? Yin-Yang lowered his head to look and was dumbfounded again. That violent explosion just now not only existed in his consciousness, but also in reality, directly blowing all his clothes to shreds. Right now, he was lying naked on the bed. As for Whitey Big, Whitey 2, Whitey 3, Whitey 4, and Whitey 5. The 5 of them stuck out their tongues and quickly licked every part of their bodies, from head to toe, chest to buttocks, In any case, no part of her body was spared. This bunch of little fellows were licking. Suddenly, Yin-Yang recalled that the inexplicable explosion earlier had caused blood to shoot out from every pore on his body. He had thought that he might have died from the bleeding. Now that he thought about it, it was probably a process of old blood flushing out new blood. However, his old blood seemed to be a good thing as well. After all, his entire body was a treasure after eating so much good stuff. No wonder these little fellows were so eager. These little fellows were licking this. His arms, stomach, chest, shoulders, and even his feet had been licked clean. Then, his crotch went numb, f*ck me. Yin-Yang pulled Whitey 4 out from his crotch, his face contorted. Don't you f*king know that there are barbs on your tongue? It's fine if it's anywhere else, but here. Whitey 4 looked at him innocently. With a meow, it stuck out its tongue and licked its mouth again, revealing a satisfied expression. Big Whitey and Whitey 2 were already lying on his head, licking his scalp. When I'm in the forest in the future, I mustn't bleed or suffer any serious injuries that could cause me to faint. Yin Yang decided inwardly. Otherwise, I might turn into a pile of poop when I wake up. He had to guard against such things. It was too possible for it to happen. Luckily, he had raised these Whiteys and they were affectionate towards him, otherwise, wouldn't he have torn him apart in this short period of time? Yin Yang was drenched in sweat, grabbing a large towel and wiping himself continuously. Whitey 3, Whitey 4, and Whitey 5 saw that there was nothing good left, so they climbed down from his body unhappily and turned to lick the walls and the bed sheets. After all, those places also had Yin Yang's essence. Blood. Yin Yang covered his eyes, allowing the two little fellows on his head to lick his scalp delicately. Although it was uncomfortable, it was good stuff after all. It would be best not to waste it if possible. Then, his deific consciousness entered his deific consciousness space once more. Aya! Emmy cheered, almost scaring Yin Yang. When he opened his eyes to take a look, he was shocked by what he saw. The deific consciousness space was 3 times larger than before. Emmy was still in the center of the space, exuding a green air of vitality like it was breathing clouds and mist before it absorbed spiritual chi continuously. Emmy's third leaf had grown after this incident. It was an adult leaf, dark green and thick, lush and lush. A patch of green circled in the air, slowly forming a few lines of words. Just as Yin Yang saw it, the words turned into a wisp of green smoke and burrowed into Yin Yang's mind. Instantly, he felt refreshed. The endless divine art had broken through to the 3rd stage. 909 blood souls under the saber. I will guard the good and evil of the world. The blade's edge is cold in the peaceful world. The 3-leaf golden lotus shakes the heavens. Have I broken through? Yin Yang tried to circulate the new cultivation method, feeling the different cultivation experience bit by bit. He could only feel his entire body brimming with energy. The feeling, the atmosphere, made him excited. However, he did not feel happy because of this. There was only heaviness and sorrow. Brothers, now. I finally have the ability to protect myself. Yin Yang's eyes were gleaming like a wolf's. I will continue to speed up my cultivation. 5th brother, about sister-in-law. I'm very sorry. It's my fault for not being able to protect her. I could have kept her safe. However, I will definitely avenge her. To me, Sister Yu is no different from all of you. Thinking of Yun Zuyu, Yin Yang's heart was filled with sorrow. This pitiful yet respectable beauty, with a pure heart and peerless beauty, had basically never had a few days of comfort in her life. She had been abducted and tortured since she was young. She had finally escaped with her 5th brother and lived a few years of peace. However, the person who had taken her in had died. When she reunited with her 5th brother, her heart belonged to someone and her body belonged to someone else. Then, the person she loved had become one of the 9 supremes according to fate. This was the blessing of fate and the blessing of fate. It was also a great honor. However, behind this glory, the friendship between the two of them had been extinguished. Not only could they not be together for a long time, they had become estranged and it would be difficult for them to meet again. Yun Zuyu had never minded it and was willing to wait silently for the day her lover returned. However, it was this hope that, after waiting for a few years, she suddenly received the news that her lover had met with an unexpected mishap and had died in a foreign land. Although Yin Yang's appearance had temporarily freed her from the shadow of despair and allowed her to continue waiting in the false atmosphere of hope, in the end, she could not avoid the ending of a beauty dying a tragic death. In this life of hers, other than wandering from place to place, there was nothing else besides waiting foolishly. The saying that beauties had a tragic life since ancient times was actually so hard to break. Thinking of this, Yin Yang recalled that Yun Zuyu had reminded him to be careful and had even thanked him before they parted last night. Thanked? Yin Yang's gaze froze. Wuyin. Yin Yang called out. Shui Wuyin came over, looking exhausted. What's the result of the investigation? Yin-yang asked directly. Surprisingly, it wasn't an explosion that caused Cirrus House to collapse. Perhaps we still have to attribute the situation to an explosion, but the source of the explosion wasn't explosives. Shui Wuyin gave his conclusion directly. There wasn't the slightest smell of explosives around, let alone traces of gunpowder. This is absolutely true. Yin-yang snorted. Could it be that the method used by the other party is unique and beyond your knowledge? Absolutely not. The amount of explosives needed to raise the entire Cirrus House to the ground is definitely not small. Collapsing a building with explosives isn't something that can be accomplished by just placing a powerful explosive in one spot. It requires a rather precise setup, and even if it's successful, there will be a large amount of traces left behind that can't be erased. The situation at Cirrus House is definitely not caused by explosives. Based on the current situation there, it seems like, Shui Wuyin replied uncertainly, it was a super strong practitioner who moved in midair and smashed his fist down, causing such destruction. Only an extremely powerful and irresistible mystical qi would come into contact with the ground and create an explosive radiation-like power, completely destroying the entire building. This also explains the origin of the deep pit in the ground. However, the Cirrus House was the only one affected, which means, Yin-yang understood Shui Wuyin's uncertainty at once. It was already difficult to strike from a high altitude and raise Cirrus House to the ground with a single punch, but what was even more difficult was that the buildings around Cirrus House were not affected at all. Even if Ling Xiaozui were here personally, he would not be able to achieve such a level of control. Chapter 298. Based on this, did it not mean that the level of the person who destroyed Cirrus House was beyond the knowledge of everyone in Tianxian continent? If this was the case, it was tantamount to saying that everyone in Cirrus House was destined to be annihilated. There was no chance of survival. What else? I've checked the entire ruins carefully, not letting go of even the slightest detail. Shui Wuyin said. Finally, I found some broken ornaments. As he spoke, he placed a small cloth bag in front of Yin-yang and opened it. Yin-yang's face twitched at once as he glanced at it. In the small cloth bag, there were broken pieces of jade bracelet, bent golden hairpins that had been broken into a few pieces, and anything else? Also, I've collected all the tiny pieces of flesh left at the scene and confirmed that there were no complete body parts. Under such force, the human body is too fragile. It's impossible. Cough, cough. Shui Wuyin sensed Yin-yang's impending rage and said carefully, however, looking at the overall situation, it should be one or two people, who were smashed into pieces. Also, from the hair and the broken muscle lines, the deceased should be a woman, a young woman, Shui Wuyin said. Yin-yang felt his heart being squeezed tightly. He could not breathe for a moment. He turned to look at Shui Wuyin with reddened eyes. You've investigated for a day and a half and this is all you found? What I want to ask is, how much hope does Yun Zuiyu have left? What I want to know is there any possibility that she's still alive? Yin-yang roared. He hoped that Shui Wuyin could give him a definite answer. Even if there was none, he did not want such a direct denial of the possibility of survival. According to the comprehensive analysis of the current situation, if Yun Zuiyu and Qing Shanxue were at Cirrus House at the time, then Shui Wuyin coughed and said, they're definitely dead. If they were at Cirrus House at the time, how could they not be at Cirrus House at the time? Yin-yang breathed heavily. As the saying went, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. How could Yin-yang not know that Yun Zuiyu's chances of survival were slim? Everywhere he looked, there were signs of her death. However, Yin-yang still hoped that he was wrong, that Shui Wuyin could give him some leeway. But what Shui Wuyin gave them was an even more despairing death. I understand your judgment. But I still feel that she's not dead. That night, she was still drinking with me. She even gave me good food that I would never be able to eat in this world. She even told me to take care, gave me wine, and, Yin-yang said hurriedly, all of these indicate that she has long been prepared for the destruction of Cirrus House. She actually knows about this, that's why she's acting so strangely. Logically speaking, it's impossible for her to know about my future arrangements in advance. If she didn't know about it in advance, she wouldn't have such a reaction, right? Since she did this, and since she was already prepared, how could she really die? Am I right? Also, Wuyin, think about it. She waited for my fifth brother for so long without committing suicide, so why would she commit suicide now? Am I right? So, she faked her death and hid her name. Am I right? That must be it. You said she might still be alive, right? Answer me, Wuyin, am I right? Yin Yang desperately wanted to find someone who agreed with what he had just said. He was unwilling to believe from the bottom of his heart that Yun Zuiyu had died so tragically. He hoped that someone could prove to him that Yun Zuiyu was not dead. Such an act was comical, naive and even unreasonable. Such a thing should not have been done by someone like Yun Yang. He had always been calm, his mind as clear as ice, but now, he could not calm down at all. His cultivation base had achieved a breakthrough due to the accumulation. His state of mind had also been tempered by the series of killings. However, the sudden psychological barrier and the shadow of the deaths of the 9 Supreme's brothers had always been lurking in Yun Yang's heart. This time, Yun Zuiyu, who had a deep relationship with the 9 Supremes, had also fallen into the shadow of death, triggering Yun Yang's negative emotions. This psychological barrier could be called an internal demon. Shui Wuyin heaved a long sigh. He understood Yun Yang's current thoughts very well, and he knew that Yun Yang could not accept the current reality. In fact, he had a similar mentality to Yun Yang. When he had first learned about Supreme Win's death, he had gone through a similar psychological process. He could be said to be the person who understood and wanted to put an end to Yun Yang. However, he also knew that Yun Yang's current mental state was not right, but what he should give now was not soothing words but a thunderous roar. The 4 Seasons Tower's revenge could come at any time. There was no time for Yun Yang to slowly relax. If Yun Yang, the backbone of the team, was in such a state, there was only one path left for them: total annihilation. He had to let Yun Yang face reality and face the truth. Young master. Shui Wuyin said in a low voice, the current reality, the situation at the scene, everything proves that they are already dead. Shui Wuyin's words made Yun Yang's eyes widen in rage, a murderous intent shrouding Shui Wuyin. All the accessories that were collected were originally worn by Yun Zuiyu and Qing Shanxue. On their heads, on their hands, so, they're dead. There's no more fluke. The so-called feigning death and concealing one's identity is just a lame excuse used to deceive oneself. Shui Wuyin said coldly, I know that young master can't accept their deaths, but what's done is done. You have to accept it even if you don't want to. That's why I've collected all the scattered flesh and blood and torn clothes. Shui Wuyin said, I think, as their only family in this world, what young master should do now is to build a cenotaph for them, so that their souls can rest in peace, so that they will no longer be ownerless souls. Yin Yang raised his head slowly, his cold gaze looking at Shui Wuyin. After a while, he smiled weakly and said, Shui Wuyin, do you know? Sometimes, I really want to kill you. You're so cruel. There's no humanity in you at all. I even suspect where your loyalty to 8th brother comes from. With your heart, how can you be loyal to anyone? All the cruel things that come out of your mouth sound so logical, but it's even more heart-wrenching. Shui Wuyin met Yun Yang's gaze without fear and said, the dead are already dead. What we should do is not to cry for them, nor should we be obsessed. What we should do is seek revenge and bury them in peace. Then, let those who are still alive live a better life. Live a long life. All the sadness and anger shouldn't be the emotions we should have. The so-called human nature shouldn't appear on us Avengers. Shui Wuyin said coldly, I think that young master should agree with what I said. If you don't have this intention, how can you talk about revenge? Yin Yang stood up with a dark expression and said coldly, go and work, that's what you should do. Indeed, this subordinate shall take his leave. Shui Wuyin bowed respectfully, even his greeting was meticulous, as usual. Scram! Yin Yang roared, the veins on his forehead bulging. Subsequently, Yin Yang spent a whole day to build an exceptionally exquisite cenotaph in the garden of his residence of Yun. The entire cenotaph was made of white jade. There was only a small jade protruding from the ground as far as the eye could see. Sister Yu, this is my home, and also your home. From now on, you and fifth brother will accompany me here. This is also a form of reunion. Yin Yang murmured, Sister Yu, do you know that I'm actually an orphan as well? I've always imagined that I still have relatives in this world. Since I met you, I felt that I really have an elder sister. I felt that I really had an elder sister. If you weren't my fifth sister-in-law, I would definitely recognize you as my elder sister. But sister-in-law is fine too. She's also my elder sister. I've been going to Cirrus house frequently during this period of time. Even though I know I shouldn't, even though I know that going too often will arouse suspicion, I've always created all sorts of reasons for myself to go there. Because when I go there, seeing you is like seeing my family. Your accent, your tone, it makes me feel like you're my family. I've been happy for a long time, happy for a long time. It's because I have my own family in this world. Yin Yang lit up a stick of incense and said quietly, but now I know that the warmth of this world doesn't belong to me after all. From now on, I'll be alone again. You've all left me. You've all left, Yin Yang chuckled bitterly. What I can do now is to wish you a reunion with fifth brother in the underworld, in heaven and earth, forever and ever, never to be separated. Staring at the cenotaph, Yin Yang suddenly felt that his fifth brother and sister Yu were not dead. They were standing side by side, right in front of him, holding hands and smiling at him. Yin Yang shook his head violently, his eyes wide. It was dark before him. That night, the wind howled, sounding like it was crying. Tiantang Square. In front of Supreme Flame's statue, a ball of flame was burning. The sound of the wind was soft, fanning the flame. It was neither violent nor extinguished, burning for a long time. Fifth brother, sister-in-law is looking for you. Don't forget to greet her. You must take good care of sister-in-law. She's a good woman. Fifth brother, it's a pity that you've missed her in this lifetime. I hope that you won't make the same mistake in your next life. I'm sorry. I couldn't protect her, I've let you down once again. The wind was soft, Tiantang City's night sky was getting colder. The flame was burning in front of the statue, burning, in his residence. Fu Baogua could only feel his heart in turmoil. Even when he tried to calm himself down, he was still plagued by illusions and demons. A burly figure was pacing back and forth in the study. His squarish face was filled with unconcealable fear and panic. He had been sleeping very late these few days. He knew what he was about to face. He hoped that it would come sooner, but he also hoped that he would not be able to welcome it. They were all dead. Fu Baogua counted the series of numbers. According to what he knew, the Four Seasons Tower had planted 21 men in the empire of Yutang's Tiantang City. Now, 20 of them had died. Shen Yusher was dead. Jiang Zhong was dead. Han Wufei was dead. Even the Spring Frost Hall's lord, He Han Qing, was dead. Now, there was no one else, only one person was left. Chapter 299. Fu Baogua had been waiting for a few consecutive days, waiting for Supreme Wind to come and punish him. However, Supreme Wind had never come. He did not feel the slightest bit of luck in his heart. He knew clearly that even Jiang Zhong and He Han Qing, with their secretive identities, had not been spared. They had been captured and killed in various ways. Then, how could Supreme Wind not have found out about him? He must have been exposed. It was based on such a mentality that he had been thinking of ways to move his family in these few days, using all sorts of excuses to move his family, going out to visit friends and relatives, to make use of old connections, or to stay at a friend's house. However, those who had been forcefully sent out by using their authority had gone missing, disappearing right outside the city. This included his eldest son, daughter-in-law, and his youngest grandson. Fu Baoguo knew that it was useless. All of his efforts were futile. No matter how he struggled, it would be futile. An inescapable trap had already been laid around him. It was destined that he could not escape. Furthermore, Fu Baoguo did not want to escape either. In the dead of the night, Fu Baoguo was dressed in military attire, wearing a helmet and armor. He had heard an unusual sound that should not have appeared in the deep night. At once, a touch of despair and relief appeared on his face. It was the howling of the wind, like the gates of hell had been closed. Thousands of ghosts and vengeful spirits rushed out at the same time, dancing in the vast night sky, searching for their enemies to claim their lives. "You're here," Fu Baoguo said softly. The expression on his face was indescribably complicated. However, Fu Baoguo's words did not receive any response. He seemed to have confirmed something as he walked out of the study. Although his pace was slow, it was filled with a sense of duty. The clouds in the sky were as dark as ink. The cold wind in the air was like a knife. His eyes were filled with desolation and sorrow. Fu Baoguo came to the courtyard and stood still. The cold wind brushed against his face, feeling a faint pain like an ice blade scraping against his bones. He lifted his head and looked at the rolling clouds in the sky, his gaze peculiar. A gust of wind descended from the sky, forming a tornado in front of him. Although this tornado was not abnormally large, it seemed to be able to connect the heavens and the earth. It was like a dragon swimming in the sky, soaring in the sky, connecting the heavens and the earth. The guard on night duty saw this and shouted coldly, "Who is it? How dare you cause trouble in Marshal Fu's residence?" Fu Baoguo waved his hand and said, "All of you, stand down. Later, without my orders, no one is allowed to take a step closer to this courtyard." "Yes." Whoosh. All the guards, all the personal guards, and all the experts in the mansion withdrew in an instant. It was obvious that Fu Baoguo was also a talented general, the best choice of the moment. Once the military order was given, his words were the law, and his orders were strictly enforced. None of his subordinates dared to disobey, and they moved even faster. The tornado slowly condensed in place, and a moment later, a stalwart figure slowly appeared in the wind. The tornado that lingered around the periphery was clearly still spinning and whistling, but this figure stood majestically in the tornado, motionless. The silhouette's face, brows, nose, and mouth were all blurry to the naked eye, making it difficult to discern its features. Only the gaze was bone-chilling, as if it was staring into the depths of Fu Baoguo's soul. As their gazes met, Fu Baoguo instinctively felt a shiver that came from deep within his bones. The shadow in the wind sighed coldly, "Marshal Fu, this should be the last time I call you Marshal Fu. From now on, you don't deserve this title anymore." Fu Baoguo chuckled bitterly and said bitterly, "Lord Supreme Wind is right. It's already a blessing from the heavens that I can still be called Marshal Fu at this juncture." Yin Yang said faintly, "Fu Baoguo, I've come this time with the intention of ending the vengeance with the Four Seasons Tower. It's fated that we won't rest until one of us is dead, but I'm still willing to listen to your difficulties. Just based on your contributions to Yutong's military all these years, you have the right to speak your mind." Fu Baoguo was different from Yang Buotao. He was the successor chosen by the old Grand Commandant Fang Qingtian, the next military powerhouse. Just based on his status and identity alone, he was above Yutong's northern troops Marshal, Tai Zheng, who was currently in the limelight. For this person to be able to attain such a position, other than his outstanding military talent that allowed him to look down on the younger generation of Yutong's military, he had also made numerous military contributions. During his 20 years of military service, he had fought and killed for Yutong and fought in the north and south. He was almost the military's pillar after Yutong's three marshals, Qiu, Leng, and Fang, had left the battlefield and before Tai Zheng's rise. If Yin Yang had not been certain that this person was up to no good, he would not have believed that this person had actually contributed to the 9 Supremes that day. Even if the evidence was conclusive, Yun Yang was still willing to give Fu Baogua a chance to reveal the reason for his betrayal of Yutong. After all, based on Fu Baogua's past military achievements, if he had wanted to destroy Yutong, he could have done so long ago. Any major battle that he had led, Yutong would have been destroyed as long as he had failed. There was no chance of survival. Fu Baogua clenched his fists tightly. A conflicted expression appeared on his face. However, in the end, he helplessly let go of his hands and said desolately, "There's no need. There are too many people who have committed the most heinous crimes and they all have their own difficulties. Don't many people who have committed heinous crimes have their own personal reasons as well? How can treason be forgiven just because of one's own reasons?" Yin Yang said coldly, "So you know all about it? Then why did you still do it?" Yin Yang asked coldly. Fu Baogua sucked in a deep breath and said, "I've already said that the reason isn't important, what's important is the result. I've been waiting for the same result, waiting for the Nine Supremes' judgment. Since I've committed the cause, why should I avoid the karmic retribution?" Yin Yang's laughter was bone-chilling as he said calmly, "Fu Baogua, you can say it so casually, but is your heart, is your person really so? If I hadn't appeared, would you have been able to wait for this judgment, this karmic retribution?" Fu Baogua's squarish face contorted into a menacing grimace. If all of the Nine Supremes were annihilated at Tianxian Cliff that day, without a single survivor, Fu Baogua, what you've done would be like a rock sinking into the ocean. Would you still say what you've just said? Yin Yang's voice grew colder. Fu Baogua did not speak, only hanging his head low. "So, you've never thought of admitting your guilt?" Yin Yang said coldly, "The reason you've admitted your guilt now, the reason you didn't escape or resist, is only because you're forced by the situation, because you know that there's only death for you now. You have nowhere else to go, there's only death. This is the real reason why you've been waiting here quietly. It looks like you're waiting for a deserving punishment, for justice to be served, but in reality, it's just a passive choice that you've been forced to make. Fu Baogua, what you've done now only shows that you're a complete coward, nothing more." Yin Yang's voice was cold and icy, each word and sentence pierced into the depths of Fu Baogua's heart. His tall and sturdy body began to tremble uncontrollably. Even his body that was as strong as a mountain seemed a little hunched as he said in a hoarse voice, "Yes, it's my grave sin that can't be redeemed even if I die 1,000 times." Yin Yang said coldly, "You've been jumping up and down for the past few days, using all sorts of methods to send your family away. Fu Baogua, is it because you know that your death is near and you want to settle for the next best thing, to protect your entire family?" Fu Baogua's mighty face was bleak as he said in a low voice, "Lord Supreme Wind, families shouldn't be harmed." Yin Yang said coldly, "Then have you ever thought about the families of the brothers you've killed?" Fu Baogua's face paled at once. Yin Yang gritted his teeth and said, "Then have you ever thought about our families?" Fu Baogua sighed dejectedly, "I've made a grave mistake, I have nothing to say." He chuckled miserably, "Actually, from that day onwards, I've known that my sins are unpardonable, that there's no longer any innocence to speak of. Only death can release me. Now that this day has finally come, I can finally say that one of my burdens has been lifted." Yin Yang looked at this board of war bigwig and heaved a long sigh in his heart. He was still waiting for Fu Baogua's explanation. Among all the people who had colluded with the Four Seasons Tower up until now, Fu Baogua was the only one whom Yin Yang really did not want to kill. Even if he did not take into account his past achievements in Yutong, he was also the one who truly had his own difficulties. Although this reason was not particularly good, it was indeed worthy of forgiveness. During this period of time, I've been waking up from my nightmares every night. Even when I tell myself that I have my reasons, that I have my own difficulties, that this is not what I want." Fu Baogua said, "But, the grave mistake has been made. No matter what the reason, the result is the same. Any reason is an excuse. It's the same for me, the perpetrator, and even more so for the victim." Fu Baogua lowered his head and looked at the armor on his body. "This is my favorite armor. Since Lord Fang's body weakened and he summoned me back, I've hung this armor on the study wall. Perhaps I'll have to wait for a very long time, or perhaps I won't have the chance to wear it on the battlefield again. Now, I only have one request. I hope that Lord Supreme Wind will allow me to die wearing this armor. Fu Baoguo raised his head to look at Yun Yang and pleaded. Yun Yang said coldly, "Do you think that you deserve to die wearing the Empire of Yutang's military armor?" Fu Baoguo lowered his head and did not speak for a long while, but he began to tremble. Suddenly, he panted heavily and raised his head abruptly, growling as if he was about to explode. "Lord Supreme Wind, why do you have to be so stingy with such a small request? Do you know what I've been through? Do you know how I felt when I was controlled by the art of soul shifting, the agony that I couldn't control myself?" Chapter 300. Before I, Fu Baoguo, was ambushed by the art of soul shifting, Fu Baoguo was an iron-blooded man, loyal to Yutang, loyal to my motherland. If it wasn't out of my control, Fu Baoguo wouldn't betray my country even if I were to be crushed into pieces. How much do you know about all this? I didn't want to say all this initially. What's done is done. No matter what my original intention was, what my true intentions were, the reality is that the 9 Supremes are in danger because of me. I'm willing to pay the price for it, it's reasonable. However, Lord Supreme Wind wants to strip away even the last bit of my dignity. Isn't this too much? Yin Yang asked sharply, "Too much? Is it really too much? You said that you were ambushed by the art of soul shifting and you had no choice. I'll assume that you're telling the truth. However, the first time can be involuntary, but what did you do after that? Did you tell them about what happened to you, about how you had no choice? Old Sir Fong, old Sir Chiu, you can talk to these people, explain what you've done, how you were persecuted. Did you tell them? Once or twice, you didn't tell them. You allowed your uncontrollable words and actions to harm Yutang's warriors. Your so-called involuntary act isn't an excuse for your inaction. Also, when Yang Butao asked you for information, you weren't controlled by the art of soul shifting then, were you? But you still leaked the information. Was that also forced by the Four Seasons Tower? Until my brothers were killed, you know very well what you've done before and after. Was it really involuntary? Have you ever made up for it? Have you ever thought of making up for it? After the 9 Supremes were killed, the millions of Empire of Yutang's warriors retreated on the battlefield, countless of our brothers died under the blades. What have you done? You and Jiang Zhong have met secretly many times. In the past year, you've met as many as 8 times. Were these meetings involuntarily? He Hanqing had only used the art of soul shifting to control your mind 3 times, only 3 times. These experiences of the art of soul shifting can prove that you didn't intend to be rebellious, but how do you explain what happened after that? Do you still want to say that it was involuntary? Fu Baoguo. No matter what you say, you're just a coward. Yin Yang said sharply, "Why did the elders of the Fu family give you the name Fu Baoguo back then? Fu Baoguo, you say that I'm too much, that I'm stingy with a piece of clothing. Let me ask you, if you die now, how will you face your ancestors? Can you really look at your own name with a clear conscience? Just one sentence is enough to erase all the charges? You're a citizen of Yutang, a soldier of Yutang, a general of the military, the next appointed successor of the Grand Commandant. Ask yourself, who have you let down for what you've done these 2 years? For the country, for the family, for others, and for yourself, which one are you worthy of? Should I give up on myself after falling into someone's trap? After being dragged into the quagmire, would he willingly dive deeper into the quagmire and sink? Don't you even have the courage to come out? Watching the warriors die in battle, their families wailing in anguish, you sell your family's assets and send silver taels over secretly. Can it really make up for the guilt in your heart? You've been helping the Four Seasons Tower to pass on information, but at the same time, you sell your family's assets to compensate the families of the fallen warriors. Fu Baoguo, don't you think that your actions are strange? You've said it yourself just now, that the Fu family is a family of generals, but how can you let down the loyal souls of your ancestors? Fu Baogua trembled. The murderous intent in Yun Yang's heart grew, but he was still hesitant, unable to make up his mind. Although Yun Yang's words were filled with disdain towards Fu Baogua's actions, belittling him to the point that he was worthless, Fu Baogua was truly helpless in the beginning. He had been controlled by He Hanqing's art of soul shifting from the beginning to the end, doing things that went against his will time and time again. Gradually, he had no choice but to act as the enemy's accomplice. It was pitiful. Most importantly, other than Fu Baogua's indirect participation in the Nine Supremes matter, he really did not do anything else, especially the information regarding Yutong's military. He had never leaked any of it. Otherwise, with Fu Baogua's identity and status, he would not have to worry about being discovered even if he had secretly made a copy of Yutong's war strategy. If he were to be killed, it would more or less be a pity. Besides, Yutong's military could no longer afford to lose him. The morale of Yutong's military could not take the blow of knowing that such a pillar of support was actually a spy. The green shadow of the wind swirled as Yun Yang's voice drifted over. Fu Baogua, you know your sins very well. I won't kill you today, but I hope that your final destination is to die in the battlefield. This can preserve your family's reputation and loyalty for generations, and it can also be considered as paying for your sins. Your family will return safely to the residence of Fu tomorrow morning. Fu Baogua, take care. Yutong's military can no longer afford to lose a great general. As Yun Yang's voice drifted away, the green whirlwind rose from the ground and soared into the sky like a raging dragon, dissipating into thin air. He had left, just like that. He had left, just like that. I'll confess my crimes tomorrow. Fu Baogua murmured, I'll wait for His Majesty's punishment. A voice drifted over from the sky, no one is asking you to confess your crimes. There have been too many troubles in the country during this period of time, too many traitors. The military's morale is already unstable and the people are anxious. If even you, Fu Baogua, become a spy, then it's not a good thing for Yutong's people. I hope that you're going to make up for it and not die. Your final destination can't be a hasty slaughter. Use the rest of your life to defend Yutong's border. Since you've sincerely repented, then, you should think of how to make up for it, to make it up to you. Supreme Wind's voice drifted into Fu Baogua's ears once again. Fu Baogua was overwhelmed with emotions. He stood there, trembling, his face filled with guilt. His expression kept changing. After a while, he suddenly sat down on the ground, hugging his head with both hands, choking with sobs that gradually turned into wailing. This great general who had been through hundreds of battles for his entire life, even if he were to be beheaded, it might not make his expression change. However, at this moment, he was wailing like a child. The morning assembly of the next day. Fu Baogua submitted a petition, requesting to be sent out to guard the eastern border. Taizheng going to the north was an expedient move. After all, Yang Buotao had just passed away and the northern troop needed a capable general to hold the fort. However, the empire of Yutong's biggest enemy and the most dangerous opponent was still Dongxian. The empire of Dongxian had produced many famous generals and was even guarded by the god of war, Han Sanhe. Dongxuan's defense line could be said to be the most dangerous in the empire of Yutong. The civil and military officials in the imperial court had been having a headache over this candidate. When Fu Baogua took the initiative to suggest it, the eyes of the civil and military officials in the imperial court brightened. Fu Baogua's ability was not only sufficient. Strictly speaking, his prestige, battle achievements, and military merit were even higher than Taizheng's, close to the three military elders. It was because of this that he was the appointed successor of the military, the person who would take over the position of Grand Commandant after the old Grand Commandant and take charge of the imperial court. However, it was also because of Fu Baogua's high merit, military merit, and prestige in the military that if he were to be only a marshal, there would inevitably be the suspicion of being suppressed. In addition, the old Grand Commandant would not be able to hold on much longer. He could not do without this successor. Therefore, everyone wanted to choose Fu Baogua, but no one would suggest for him to be stationed at the northern border. However, now that Fu Baogua had suggested it himself, the situation was vastly different. His Majesty rewarded Fu Baoguo's request and approved the petition immediately. Fu Baoguo's actions were swift and decisive. On the morning of the third day, he ordered for the army to set off. If you accept it, cast a few monthly votes. If you don't cast a monthly vote. I'll see the increase in votes tomorrow and I'll know what you think. Chapter 301. Fu Baoguo's voice traveled far and wide. All the soldiers raised the weapons in their hands at the same time, chanting in unison, "With this heart and this body, we serve the country with unwavering loyalty, until our deaths." A command was given. The army departed. Fu Baoguo's majestic body sat on the horse, like an arrow released from the bow, galloping all the way without turning back. Somehow, old Grand Commandant Fong felt a sense of determination as he looked at the figure of his proud disciple. It was as if Fu Baoguo's departure this time would never return. His successor, his direct disciple, would never see him again. It was a small temple. There was a small temple situated in the middle of a vast mountain range with a circumference of no less than 10,000 miles, which was completely devoid of human habitation. This temple was dedicated to the true Lord's Equal. This true Lord's Equal was one of the legendary immortals in the Tianxian continent for tens of thousands of years. His legend could be said to be known by every household, but for such a remote place to have such a monarch's temple, it was still a strange thing, and also a wonderful sight. In the small temple, smoke curled up. A person, dressed in a robe of stars, sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, not speaking or moving. His face was completely hidden in the rising smoke, and no one could see it. Just like the true Lord's Equal who was being worshipped, his real face could not be seen clearly. What one could see was a hazy feeling, as if this person was in the clouds and did not belong to the mortal world. In front of this person, there was another person. It was Venerable Lord Saber, who was covered in wounds. Venerable Lord Saber had previously been besieged by 3 parties and had lost a lot of his energy. He had also been struck by Yun Yang's saber, causing his cultivation method to be incomplete. After that, he had rushed all the way here without any rest or recuperation. His condition was truly near the end of his tether. If he were to rely on his own cultivation base to recuperate, it would take at least 3 to 5 years for him to recover. So, the many arrangements of this tower in the Empire of Yutong have all been wiped out, with no one escaping? The robed man spoke faintly. Yes. Venerable Lord Saber lowered his head. He Hanqing is also dead? The robed man said lightly, his doppelganger, is also dead? Unforeseen events came one after another during this period of time. First, it was Ling Xiaozue who blamed He Hanqing inexplicably and planted the soul-fixating sword in He Hanqing's body. Before the sword was completely worn out, He Hanqing couldn't use his clone at all. Forcefully using it would only further damage his soul. As a result, He Hanqing was killed directly, his head separated from his body. Venerable Lord Saber said, however, when he was on the verge of death, he continuously used the art of soul ignition. His spirit was almost exhausted. Even if he had a doppelganger, it would be difficult for him to return to the body. The robed man snorted and said lightly, so many years of planning and arrangements, so many years of experience in the martial world, were uprooted by a junior, a fish that slipped through the net, and in the end, even our lives were lost. If the Four Seasons Tower is filled with such trash, how can we talk about 1,000 years of hegemony and a foundation for generations to come? Venerable Lord Saber dared not say a word as soon as the man in the robe uttered his words. More than 100 people stationed in Yutong are about a quarter of the Four Seasons Tower's bottom feeder force. How could they be destroyed so easily? The robed man closed his eyes, his face expressionless. Looks like He Hanqing is really old. Venerable Lord Saber pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, regarding the current change, it may not be entirely He Hanqing's responsibility. It is also because the enemy we are facing is too strong. Take the last battle as an example. We are not facing the remnants of the 9 Supremes, but the school of spring and autumn and the concourse of the underworld. The fundamental reason for our defeat is that the concourse of the underworld sent out all 10 of its Yama kings at the same time. Their elites were revealed and they caught us off guard. In addition, there were many follow-up arrangements. Facing such a situation now, an unprecedented war in the martial world might happen as soon as we make a move. This subordinate dared not act rashly, so I have come to report this to Venerable Lord. The robed man said faintly, "It seems that the Four Seasons Tower has not terrorized the martial world for too long. The people of the martial world have forgotten the terror of the Four Seasons Tower. So much so that any random sect dares to bully us." Although the voice was indifferent, it was filled with a murderous aura. Venerable Lord Saber's body trembled suddenly, his eyes were filled with a strong desire to fight. Back then, the Four Seasons Tower had 12 halls, for supreme lords, 5 realms, 24 celestial primes, 365 valiant generals. The Four Seasons Tower had terrorized the martial world and established its position as the top sect in the martial world. How many years have passed since then? The robed man slowly opened his eyes, 2 bolts of lightning shot out. The martial world is full of forgetfulness. The people of the martial world are used to forgetting. Therefore, many experts dare not return to seclusion even after they have achieved success. As long as they do so, there will not even be a legend of them left in the martial world. Therefore, many people have no choice but to keep showing their faces in public, to keep doing things, to keep making a name for themselves, to keep fighting in the martial world. Only in this way can they maintain their status and reputation. In the martial world, only by maintaining status and reputation for a long time can there be continued benefits to accompany them. No matter who it is, be it the imperial court, the martial world, the scholars, or the generals, living in this world is nothing more than benefits. The robed man's voice was low and slow, filled with a strange rhythm. This is the origin of the 8 words that have been passed down the world for the longest time. People in the martial world have no choice. It is nothing more than that. As the saying goes, when a person is no longer in the martial world still has its legend. This saying applies to those who stand at the pinnacle or the once glorious sects because they have created a sufficiently sensational legend. Even when they have retreated from the martial world, there will still be many people out there who will spontaneously sing praises of their past deeds. Therefore, they can live in peace for a long time. Furthermore, as such existences go into seclusion, their reputation grows. The legend can only grow more and more outrageous. Du Guchou, Ling Xiaozue, and Jun Moyan are the same. As time goes on, the legend becomes more and more unreal. The robed man wore a mocking expression. Therefore, in this world, the gods have appeared. The words spoken by the robed man had been spoken in a calm and straightforward manner, but Venerable Lord Saber was sweating profusely as he listened. He prostrated on the ground, not daring to make a sound. The so-called martial world rankings, the unrivaled beauty, the unrivaled expert, the unrivaled swordsman, the unrivaled assassin, the unrivaled sect, the unrivaled ancient top 10, and so on, the robed man said faintly, the origin of everything comes from this. The Four Seasons Tower has entered the realm and reappeared. It can be said to be an existence that transcends the world. It has always been such a legend, the most intimidating legend in the world. However, because of the 9 Supremes' attack this time, this legend has been reduced to commonplace. In the hearts of ordinary people, the Four Seasons Tower has become an ordinary martial world sect. At most, it is a formidable martial world sect. Therefore, some people have jumped out. They think that the Four Seasons Tower is nothing more than this. They think that they can defeat this legend, the top force of the martial world, and even replace it. Therefore, at this time, the robed man stood up, his body surrounded by clouds and mist. He paced a few steps slowly and said, "The Four Seasons Tower can no longer keep a low profile and let things slide. It must strike with force, once again using the method of subduing the world by force and bathing the martial world in blood, to establish an unshakable reputation. This is the way to settle down now. Therefore, as you have said, an unprecedented war in the martial world is inevitable. If no action is taken, the Four Seasons Tower's opponents, or forces that dare to lay their hands on the Four Seasons Tower, will only increase. The robed man's expression was calm and indifferent. This time, since the concourse of the underworld and the school of spring and autumn have jumped out, then, this tower shall use them to establish our dominance. It was just two simple sentences, but it signaled the coming of a bloody storm. The entire martial world would be stirred up by these two sentences. Subdue the world by force, bathe the martial world in blood. Yes. Venerable Lord Saber took a deep breath. Saber. The robed man looked at Venerable Lord Saber with a sharp gaze. How long has your cultivation base been stuck in this realm? How long has it been since you last improved? Venerable Lord Saber was ashamed. It has been 27 years. For 27 years, I have not improved at all, the robed man said faintly. This war in the martial world will be a great test for you. If you can't break through, the chances of you dying in the battle will be more than 80%. Whether it's against the kings of the concourse of the underworld or the old monster himself, or even if it's just against the school of spring and autumn's elder level, you have no chance of winning. Your chances of survival are slim. Now, sword, snow, frost, and ice have all entered the 8th heaven realm. Frost is highly likely to enter the 9th heaven realm this year, and then break through to the Tao realm. You, on the other hand, have been stuck at the 4th heaven realm for 27 years. There's really nothing more to say about this gap. The robed man said faintly, now the world knows that there is a saber in the sky, but why don't they know that there is snow in the sky? And the others? You've kept your title, but they have chosen to improve their abilities in silence. The robed man said, this is the difference. For every gain, there will be a loss. Venerable Lord Saber was sweating profusely, unable to speak. However, you have to learn to understand this. The robed man stood up with his hands clasped behind his back and leisurely took a step forward. For every gain, there will be a loss. However, there will always be a chance to take back the loss. If there is a loss first, there may not be a chance to take back the gain. His body walked out like the floating clouds and flowing water. He said slowly, perhaps it will never be taken back for all eternity. Venerable Lord Saber could only feel chills all over his body. It was as if all the snow and frost in the world had fallen on him, chilling to the bone and freezing his heart. His mind was muddled as he followed the robed man out. Outside, it was snowing heavily. At this moment in the secular world, although the weather had turned cold, it had not reached the point of heavy snow. However, in this uninhabited forest, it was already covered in silver and snow. Reading everyone's comments, I'm glad for your understanding. The number of subscribers is still low. I hope everyone will support the genuine edition. After all, the genuine subscription was the lifeblood of a book. Fong Ling's full-time job of supporting his family depended on these subscriptions. Chapter 302. The cultivation of martial arts and the pursuit of fame and fortune in the secular world are the same. For the sake of fame and fortune, some people would desperately pursue it. For those who were lucky, although they would obtain fame and fortune, they would lose their health due to overwork. Some people can always maintain a healthy body, but they are not fated with fame and fortune. It is difficult for them to enjoy wealth, splendor. However, there are many who can live without illness and become the richest in the world. This is an individual's fate, fortune, and destiny. It is hard to force it. Even if it is forced, it is difficult for anyone to succeed. Those who insist on success are few and far between. The robed man's face revealed a distant expression. Saber, do you understand what I mean? In this cold world, the biting cold wind felt like it was going to cut his flesh off. However, Venerable Lord Saber's face was dripping with sweat the size of soybeans. He could clearly hear the intention of the Venerable Lord to give up on him. It was only Supreme Lord Spring Frost and the Hall of Spring. It was far from enough. However, if any one of them were to perish, the Four Seasons Tower would have every reason to massacre the martial arts world. The robed man turned around, his cold gaze fixed on Saber's face. Venerable Lord Saber felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He puffed up his chest and said, "For the boss, Saber will die 1,000 times without regrets." The robed man's knife-like gaze slid across his face. After a long time, he spoke again, "Among the 9 Supremes, who is still alive?" Venerable Lord Saber said, "Looking at the current situation, there is more than an 80% chance that Supreme Wind is still alive." Supreme Wind? The robed man said faintly, "Then what about the deviant flame that appeared earlier?" Venerable Lord Saber was at a loss for words. The robed man murmured, "When the 9 Supremes return to their origin, the world will be turned upside down, the martial world will be dominated by the Supremes alone." Heh, the meaning of this sentence should be that the survivors have cultivated the cultivation methods of the others. When the 9 great manifestations are combined into one, not only can it be Supreme Wind or Supreme Flame, it can also be any one of them. Do you really think that I still can't figure out the hidden meaning? The robed man snorted and said, "Illusion, it will always be an illusion. There is only one person left from the 9 Supremes. There is no doubt about this. In other words, as long as that person is found and killed, the legend of the 9 Supremes will vanish forever." The robed man said quietly, "Although we have lost all of the Hall of Springs forces, we have also confirmed that this bastard is in Tiantang City. As long as we can confirm this point, the loss of the Hall of Spring will not be considered a loss. Since the 9 Supremes are left with only one person, then," the robed man turned to look at Venerable Lord Saber, "go to the Valley of Soul, return to recuperate. When you have recovered, call for snow and bring 4 to 5 men to carry out the secret operation in Tiantang City. Come back when you catch and kill this remnant of the 9 Supremes." "Yes. This time, it's against the concourse of the underworld or the school of spring and autumn." The robed man's tone was icy cold. "You don't have to do anything." "Yes, thank you, boss." Venerable Lord Saber heaved a sigh of relief. If it was only against the remnant of the 9 Supremes, then there would be no risk at all. Although each of the 9 Supremes had their own mystical abilities and mystical powers, the 9 of them as one would definitely be more powerful. The ambush of the 9 Supremes had revealed that each of the 9 Supremes' cultivation base was extremely shallow. It had only been a year since the ambush. No matter how amazing the progress of one of the 9 Supremes was, it would still be limited. Moreover, it was already difficult to improve in just one mystical ability. That person had the cultivation base of all 9. Even if there were opportunities and fortuitous encounters, his progress would not be quick. Venerable Lord Saber was confident that one saber strike would be enough to deal with this person from the 9 Supremes. His boss was protecting his own life with the card, not letting him be in danger. It was truly a huge favor. "Don't celebrate too early. I have something to say first." The robed man lifted his head, allowing the snowflakes to fall on his face. He said faintly, "If you still can't catch the remnant of the 9 Supremes this time, don't come back. Even if you catch the remnant of the 9 Supremes, if your cultivation base doesn't break through during this period of time, don't come back either, because you won't be of much use anymore." "Yes." Venerable Lord Saber was drenched in cold sweat. He had made up his mind immediately. No matter what, he must catch that fellow this time. No matter where he was hiding, this mission must be completed. Also, he had to break through this time. Even if he had to train himself to death, he had to break through. Since his boss had already said so, this might really be the last chance that his boss had given him in this lifetime. How could a person who could not be of much use enjoy the honorable title of the 4 Seasons Tower? "Send me the divine dictum." The robed man said faintly, "Frost shall go to the concourse of the underworld. The 4 Seasons Challenge shall be announced to the world. Jian shall make a trip to the school of spring and autumn. In addition, send the 4 Seasons Challenge, commanding all sects, families, and martial artists in the martial world to avoid this martial world war. Those who disobey shall be killed without mercy. Send the divine dictum, issue a killing order to Bai Shue. Those who help him fight against the tower shall have their entire families annihilated, and their 9 families shall suffer. So be it." Yes. Venerable Lord Saber bowed respectfully. Seeing that the Lord had no other orders, he turned and left. Amidst the fluttering snow, the robed man looked up at the sky. The chilliness on his face had not subsided. In this world, there are still some forces that are beyond the rules of nature. The robed man took a deep breath and murmured, "Dugu Cho, Ling Xiaozue, Jun Moyan. It looks like I need to find these old friends for a chat." His body suddenly flashed, and starlight suddenly flickered in the boundless snow. The starlight became brighter and brighter, and turned into a river of stars. The river of stars extended upwards, following a mysterious trajectory, converging into the small temple, and then disappeared. A moment later, the Lord's robe turned into a black robe. With a sway of his body, he rose into the air. With a flick of his sleeves, the snow and the sky suddenly gathered in one direction. In the blink of an eye, the entire temple was covered under a thick layer of snow. The mountains were blanketed in white as far as the eye could see. There was not a single trace left. The next moment, the black-robed Lord's silhouette disappeared into the snow. The martial world of the Tianxian continent that had been quiet for a long time was suddenly stirred. Almost overnight, the entire martial world was stirred. With the appearance of this strange medallion, the entire martial world was shaken. The medallion had a unique design. It was in the shape of a hexagram. On its four corners, there was a green willow branch, a bright sun, a red leaf, and a snowflake respectively. The other two corners were symmetrical with the word heaven and earth. In the middle was a circle, and within the circle was a word. Nian. With the appearance of this oddly shaped medallion, some of the more experienced martial artists in the martial world began to panic. Many of them began to turn around and rush back. They were not only rushing back to their homes, but they were also looking for a safe place to settle down. No matter how important the matter at hand was, they would finish it as soon as possible if they could. If they could not, they would just give up on it. Everyone was in a hurry. Everyone had a premonition in their hearts that the chaotic era of the Jianghu had once again arrived. The Four Seasons Challenge and the Heaven and Earth Medallion had reappeared in the martial world. This was the martial world's biggest event for the past 1,000 years. The 8 great families, the 6 great sects, and the various trading companies whose business networks covered half of the continent had taken the same measure. All personnel outside were recalled. All external activities were stopped. All the business transactions had to be closed up. Then, in the next few days, other strange tokens that had never appeared in the world also appeared one after another. Some experienced and knowledgeable Jianghu veterans gave the answer. Those were the summoning orders from some of the 10 great ancient sects. They summoned all disciples outside to return to the sect to prevent any accidents from happening. The concourse of the underworld had also issued an emergency recall order. All gold-ranked assassins in the concourse of the underworld were to give up on their assigned missions and return to the headquarters within 10 days to await further orders. The Merciless Tower, another assassin organization that was as famous as the concourse of the underworld, had also issued an order. All assassins outside were to await further orders. Before the new order was issued, the Merciless Tower would not accept any more missions. It was as if the air was filled with a suffocating pressure. Everyone was walking in a hurry, their faces solemn. Even those who were inexperienced and didn't know how powerful it was felt inexplicably pressured. "Senior, what is this?" Go home quickly. You can't roam the martial world anymore." "Why?" "Take care of yourself." "Brother, may I ask what's going on? Why do all of you look like you've gone mad?" "Let me give you a piece of advice, don't ask, lest you get yourself into trouble. Going home as soon as possible is the right thing to do. Find a wife to sleep with and keep yourself safe." "What's going on? Why is it the right thing to do? Why is it safe?" "Curiosity kills the cat. Let's not waste any more time talking. Goodbye." "Grandfather, why are you in such a hurry? We've only been out for 2 days. I haven't had enough fun." "Little ancestor, the world has changed. You're still thinking of playing? The only thing you need to do now is to go home quickly. You must listen to grandfather this time. Even a day late will cause a huge problem. What's going on? Can't you just say it clearly? To put it simply, the martial world's calamity has begun. In some unknown, secret places, people were discussing it. Do you see it? The Four Seasons Tower's subjugation of the world by force has begun. Are they going to start a bloodbath in the martial world again? It's been a long time since they made such a big move. Why did they start all of a sudden this time? There must be a reason. There's no benefit in pursuing the root of the problem now. It's better to leave this troublesome place quickly and return home to live peacefully. There's no need to get involved in this mess. That's right. If we can't avoid being implicated when we return home, we can only blame it on our bad luck. However, it's appropriate if we continue to roam the martial world and be implicated. Good words can't persuade a damned ghost. It has nothing to do with anyone. Yes. Let's go quickly. Let's go. What a calamity. Chapter 303. Calamity. These were the two words that the pugilistic people of the profound sky continent often talked about. According to the legends, when the Four Seasons Tower was first built, there was a man who brought his 3 subordinates and swept through the martial world. Everywhere they went, heroes bowed their heads. They were invincible. After a period of time, the Four Seasons Tower was officially established and began to make a name for itself. It was also the legendary first subjugation of the world by force. After a period of time, the Four Seasons Tower had annihilated 3 of the top 9 sects in the world, bathing the martial world in blood. It had also established the Four Seasons Tower's reputation. After a few hundred years, it seemed that this group of villains had a change of dynasty, and a new group of people came out to ravage Jianghu. That time was known as the 12 Years of Blood in the martial world. Within 12 years, the Four Seasons Tower's experts had once again subdued the world by force, bathing the martial world in blood. The unrivaled expert of the martial world at that time had been killed by the Four Seasons Tower's boss in a single battle. All the people and forces who had any dissatisfaction or opinions towards the Four Seasons Tower or any conflict with them were uprooted. During those 12 years, the entire martial world was terrified at the mere mention of the Four Seasons Tower's name. For the next 300 years, no one in Jianghu dared to call themselves the number 1 expert. It was only when Du Guchou rose in power that there was a new legend in the martial world, a new invincibility, a new unrivaled master. At that time, the Four Seasons Tower had already gone into hiding. No one knew if there had been any battle. However, after Du Guchou had conquered the world, he had gone into seclusion. Shibu walked before the rosy clouds. Then, there was Ling Xiaozui. This publicly acknowledged unrivaled expert had gone head-on against the Four Seasons Tower, fighting for 100 years. On the surface, it seemed like the Four Seasons Tower was on the losing end, but in the end, it was still inconclusive. It could not be said that the Four Seasons Tower had lost or Ling Xiaozui had won. Then, until now, the Four Seasons Tower's legend and reputation seemed to have faded from the people's sight. However, at that moment, this mysterious organization that had been hiding in the dark for far too long and had practically been forgotten by the world of martial artists suddenly appeared in the world again without any warning. They faced the entire world of martial artists in a domineering manner and bared their fangs. No one knew why the Four Seasons Tower had reappeared this time. But everyone wisely chose to hide. Because the legend of subduing the world by force and bathing the world in blood was too terrifying. There was only one Du Guchou and one Ling Xiaozui. The martial world had never lacked people who thought highly of themselves, but there was no one in the current martial world who could compare to these two. Yin Yang cultivated every day, but news from all over the world kept coming in. Once Shui Wuyin received the news, he came looking for Yin Yang immediately. Young master, the Four Seasons Tower has begun to make a big move. Yes, are you ready? Anytime. All right. Leave immediately. Yes. From this day onwards, Shui Wuyin disappeared from the residence of Yun. This was the plan that the two of them had come up with long ago. Before the Four Seasons Tower made their move, the Nine Heavens dictum could still be used to maintain its current state. However, once the Four Seasons Tower launched their revenge, the Nine Heavens dictum would have to switch from operating in the dark to hiding underground immediately. Within a short period of time, unless it was absolutely necessary, he absolutely could not take any action. The slightest oversight could lead to extremely serious consequences. Shui Wuyin had been preparing for this for a long time. All the members of the Nine Heavens dictum who could be contacted were to go dark and accept new arrangements. Those who could not be contacted were to give up immediately. All the relevant secret codes and connections were cut off in one fell swoop. Safety was ensured. Other than that, Yun Yang had another request for Shui Wuyin. Wuyin, I hope that you can make use of this opportunity to build the world's top underground intelligence organization. I don't care what name you use for this intelligence organization, but you must have complete control over it. Don't let anyone else take advantage of it. I will definitely do it. Shui Wuyin disappeared from then on. Bai Yixue pushed open Yun Yang's door with a loud bang. His face was pale, his lips quivering as he looked at Yun Yang with a blank gaze. Bai Yixue's usual demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Just by looking at his piercing gaze, he was no better than a fool. What is it now? Yun Yang asked in surprise. Right, Bai Yi, why haven't you left yet? Didn't you say that you're leaving today? The past is over, we don't owe each other anything anymore. Haven't I already given you what should be given? It's all done with the silver and the goods. It'll be your fault if you continue to hang on to me. Bai Yixue's lips quivered as he looked at Yun Yang. After a long time, he finally moaned like he was about to cry. Yun Yang, you've dug one pit after another, you're ruthless indeed. I've finally figured it out. Once I've fallen into your pit, don't expect to jump out. Yun Yang exclaimed in shock, what do you mean? Where did this come from? Although we're friends now, you can't just speak the truth. I'll be proud if you praise me like this. Bai Yixue's expression was uglier than if he was crying. Forget it. Be proud, be proud. Anyway, even if you've handled this matter appropriately and plan to stay out of it, it won't work now, huh? What's going on? Tell me straight, see if I can take it. The Four Seasons Tower has issued a heaven and earth dictum to me, to kill Bai Yixue. Bai Yixue felt disheartened. From now on, I'm the martial world's public enemy. Yun Yang was shocked and sighed. Wow. This is too ruthless. This whole thing. With a sigh and a wave of his hand, Lao Mei brought out a tray. Yun Yang said sincerely, Bai Yi, I've always known that you have great ambitions and your heart is in the martial world. We're considered friends during this period of time. Now that you're leaving, take these things with you. Bai Yixue's eyes widened as he looked at Yun Yang in disbelief. There are banknotes here, 1,000,000 taels. 500 pieces of mystical stones, 80 pieces of various exotic metals, 10 pieces of fine jade. Yun Yang smiled amicably. It's just a token of my appreciation, Brother Bai, please don't think it's too little. We'll meet again in the future. He was actually chasing him away. Bai Yixue's face was twisted. Leave? Where do you want me to go? Yun Yang gestured with his hand and said, the world is so big. With Brother Bai's skills, where can't you go? We're in the martial world, helping each other in times of need. Don't forget the martial world, we'll meet again. Bai Yixue snorted and said resolutely, I'm not leaving. How can there be such a good deal? You want to throw me away after using me? I really didn't expect you to be such a person. Yun Yang was speechless. You've made me the world's public enemy. You want to chase me away now that the dictum of death is on me? Bai Yixue said in disdain, you're thinking that you'll be safe once I leave, right? Dream on. Let me tell you, the Four Seasons Tower's dictum of death targets everyone related to the target. Anyone who assists the target in going against the tower will have their entire family annihilated, 9 generations of their family wiped out. That's why you can't stay out of this anymore. Yin Yang frowned. Brother Bai, what you said isn't right. Your mission has been completed, we have nothing to do with each other. You're just freeloading and staying here, refusing to leave. How did it become me helping you? Don't talk nonsense, someone will die if you try to claim connections. Besides, the landlord doesn't have any surplus food. I've given you so much for your travel expenses, isn't that enough? Bai Yixue said decisively, whatever you say now is useless. I'm not leaving, I'm a member of the Yun family from now on. Lao Mei and Fang Mafei can be your guards, I should be more qualified than them, shouldn't I? Don't even think of cutting ties with me, I'm yours from now on. Yin Yang looked awkward. How can Brother Bai condescend? It's easy to say that you're mine. Do you think I can force you to stay when you leave? Bai Yixue said, what are you talking about? It's decided. It's up to you whether you want me to be your guard or your butler. I'm not leaving anyway. Yin Yang snorted and said, if I had a guard like you, I'd definitely live a few years less. It's too tiring. Bai Yixue retorted indignantly, you might be tiring, but I'm the one who's tiring. If I really had a young master like you, my life might end tomorrow. Yin Yang said with a chuckle, since you're so tired, why do you have to tire yourself and others out? Leave quickly. Right now, this place is in a state of chaos. Bai Yixue said coldly, you don't have to chase me away with your words. I won't leave. I'm determined to be a member of the Yun family. The Four Seasons Tower's dictum of death also includes the residents of Yun. 9 generations will be doomed. Yin Yang snorted and said, do you want to follow me so badly? It's fine if you really want to be a member of the Yun family, but you have to make a heaven's oath first. Bai Yixue glared at him and suddenly stomped his foot, saying, do you think I don't dare? I'll be your guard wholeheartedly for the next 10 years. It was obvious that Bai Yixue had planned this beforehand, his calculations were meticulous. A period of 10 years was neither long nor short. If he were to roam the martial world alone during this period of time, he would definitely die. After all, the Four Seasons Tower's dictum of death was the most effective in the martial world. On the other hand, there was still a chance of survival in the residents of Yun. Not to mention the fact that the residents of Yun was a force of its own in Tiantang City with an extraordinary status. Yin Yang was skilled and had an extraordinary destiny. Just by using the residents of Yun as a foothold, Bai Yixue could recover quickly if he were to return to this place after being injured. In addition, Bai Yixue's cultivation base had increased more than 10-fold since he came here. Such a speed of improvement was faster than most of the blessed lands and grotto heaven. Due to all these factors, it was indeed worth it to buy his life for 10 years. If the Four Seasons Tower came looking for him and wanted to kill him within these 10 years, it would be his fate. After all, if he were to go against the Four Seasons Tower now, he would die without a doubt. However, if he were to be given a buffer of 10 years. 10 years later, his ability would probably rise to a level where he could protect himself. If he were to leave then, the Four Seasons Tower would not be able to do anything to him. As for being a guard and whatnot, so what if I'm your guard for a few years? Bai Yixue was calculating in his heart, feeling that he was getting more and more worthwhile. Was it not just 10 years? Chapter 304. Bai Yixue felt that exchanging 10 years of his time for the right to use the sacred cultivation ground for 10 years was a bargain to him. Not to mention the many additional benefits. This transaction was worth it no matter how one looked at it. 10 years it is. Deal. Yin Yang urged, swear it quickly then. Let heaven be the witness, a gentleman's word is unredeemable. Both parties hit it off like firewood and a raging fire. However, Yin Yang's reaction made Bai Yixue grumble in his heart. Why is he so straightforward? Why do I feel that something is not right? Like I've fallen into another trap. Could this be another one that this cunning fellow has dug? This fellow is the king of deceit. Could this be a new link in the chain of traps? However, Bai Yixue thought about it and felt that there was no harm in it. It was beneficial to him in every aspect. Besides, how many years have I, Baishua, been in the martial world? Even if I were to play tricks, would I lose to a young man like you? Thus, Baishua swore without hesitation. As heaven's witness, the vow was made. Yin Yang said with a grin, since you've promised to be my guard, you have to act like one. As my guard, there are 24 rules that you must abide by. Baishua was stunned. 24 rules? Why are there so many? Don't you dare think that I've never been a guard before and spout nonsense. Do you think that I'll submit to you obediently just because you say it with a straight face? You really have to submit to me. Whether others have so many or not, you have so many in my house, Yin Yang said with a grin. Baishua felt that he had really fallen into a trap again. Why didn't you say so before swearing the heaven's oath? Now that I've made the vow and heaven's will is my witness, you're only bringing out your rules now. Besides, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei didn't seem to follow so many rules, did they? My rules are, 1 is, 2 is, 24 is. Baishua's face turned blue when Yin Yang finished reciting the 24 rules. I'm not AF * King Guard, am I? Even the harshest, most unreasonable, most unscrupulous contract, seemed to be nothing more than this. This. I don't care about the others, but why do you need to take time off to relieve yourself? Baishua glared. Am I still AF * King Guard? He had to ask for leave to go to the bathroom? Why don't you ask to watch from the sidelines? What if I'm being besieged, and you see that things aren't looking good, so you run away? They had to be on guard. This was a good reason for a coward to run away. Since there's such a possibility, let's be on our guard first. It's better for both of us. Yin Yang said. Besides, your character is just average. Yin Yang gave him a sideways glance. You win. Baishua's nose twitched in anger. How is my character average? Is there anyone with a better character than me in the world of martial arts? He glared at Yin Yang for a long time, but seeing that Yin Yang was still as resolute as a mountain with no signs of changing his mind, he turned to leave in a huff. It's only F * King 10 years anyway. I can afford to play. It was only when he returned to the guest room that he realized that he was fuming so hard that his head was spinning. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei stole glances at Baishua's room door, only one thought in their minds, this fellow, since you've boarded young master's pirate ship, how can you get off so easily? 10 years and it's over? Old pal, you're thinking too much. You're your father's man for the rest of your life, accept your fate. Why did it have to be done secretly? Wasn't that obvious? Even if Baishua had become Yin Yang's subordinate now, his martial skill was still the best in the residence of Yun. Fighting Fang Mafei and Lao Mei was still child's play. Even if he could not fight Yin Yang, he could still fight Fang Mafei and Lao Mei. He could even call it a friendly match, and he could even boldly announce that he was guiding the younger generation. Therefore, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei could only grumble inwardly. They truly dared not show it on the surface. At least, they dared not do so before their cultivation base caught up to Baishua's. That night, Yin Yang had disguised Baishua. You can't wear this sword. You have to change your white robe as well. Your white is too glaring. Come, dye your hair white. This mole, put it at the corner of your right eye, this mustache, put it in front of your ear. Yes, stick the mustache above your lips. Don't pull it. After a while, Yin Yang took 2 steps back to study him. A good foundation after all, you're still quite handsome. Finally, the torment was over. Baishua grabbed the mirror and roared in anger, what's the F * King use no matter how good your father's foundation is? Is this AF * King monster? Is he still AF * King human? He's AF * King rat that's turned into a demon. Everything is for safety. Besides, disguising is one of my rules. I've told you before. F * CK me. Late at night. While Yin Yang was cultivating, suddenly, squeak, squeak, squeak. A series of scratching noises reached his ears. This sound was, Thousand Illusion Monkey? Yin Yang sprung up with a start. Wasn't this Ji Lingxi's spiritual beast? Why was it here? No matter how much it disliked its owner and how much it loved him, there was no reason for it to appear here. What had happened? When he stepped out, the Thousand Illusion Monkey was already anxiously jumping to his feet, gesticulating and squeaking anxiously as it tugged at Yin Yang's robe, trying to drag him out. Yin Yang noticed immediately that the Thousand Illusion Monkey was exhausted, covered in blood and covered in wounds. He could not help but change his expression abruptly. Something had happened. The owner of the Thousand Illusion Monkey, Ji Lingxi, was carrying Yu Rulan on her back as they moved swiftly through the forest. Her heavy panting was a clear indication of her poor condition. In fact, Yu Rulan's assessment of her current condition was not only poor, she even felt that she could collapse at any time, and once she did, she would never be able to get up again. Right now, she was at the end of her rope. The only thing that kept her going was the belief that she could bring Sister Lan to live on. Ji Lingxi had never thought that the martial world's path would be so treacherous. She had never thought that the human heart could be so treacherous. The third thing that she did not expect was that the source of their predicament was the two families that she and Yu Rulan came from. She had never felt a sense of belonging to her family, while Yu Rulan had long vowed not to marry anyone else because she was deeply in love with her brother. It was at this time that the two families came across a sudden opportunity. A young master of a reclusive family had appeared out of nowhere and offered to use a massive amount of resources in exchange for a marriage alliance. The young master had proposed to marry both Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan at the same time. This was an unexpected good thing for both the Ji family and the Yu family. Moreover, it was great news. The resources offered by the reclusive young master were huge, even to the two noble families. It was hard to resist, even though the two families had no idea why the young master wanted to marry Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan. However, it did not stop the two families from swallowing this huge pie that had fallen from the sky. After all, the items that the other party had offered as betrothal gifts were enough for the two families to ascend to a higher level. Those were all rare and extraordinary natural treasures that were hard to find in this world, as well as a large amount of cultivation resources. To put it bluntly, with these things, even if it was not easy to cultivate the young disciples of the two great clans to the great perfection realm, it would become a matter of course. It was just a matter of time and the accumulation of effort. Furthermore, it was not just one or two great perfection experts. The amount of resources was enough to create 10 or even more great perfection cultivators. Moreover, this was only the first time. It was only a gift for meeting, a gift to test the waters. Although it was named as a betrothal gift, everyone knew that the real betrothal gift was yet to come. In other words, there was still a huge amount to come. What's more, once they got married, this kind of resources would only be endless and endless in the future. With such a reclusive family as their backing, the two families could completely push themselves to the position of hegemony in the Tianxian continent. Faced with such a huge temptation, the two families agreed almost without hesitation. Ji Lingxi was an adopted daughter anyway. Marrying her out in exchange for a chance for the family to rise was a great deal. What was there to hesitate about? As for Yu Rulan, although she was the biological daughter of the Yu family and was even betrothed, Ji Lingfeng had been missing for so many years. His body would most likely not be found. Even if Ji Lingfeng was still around, how could he compare to the reclusive young master before them? That's a far cry from it. Even if Ji Lingfeng was around, the Yu family would still break off the engagement. Therefore, the higher-ups of the Yu family discussed with the Ji family and decided to call off the engagement right away. A portion of the resources would then be distributed as compensation. The Ji family was not offended, they were happy to see it happen. After all, Ji Lingfeng was only an adopted son of the Ji family and he was now missing. They could get an additional portion of resources because of this, so they agreed readily. With that, there was no more resistance from the two families. Everything seemed to fall into place. All they had to do was wait for the brides to be married and everything would be done. Unexpectedly, the young master of the reclusive family made an unexpected suggestion. He wanted to pick up his two brides personally and nurture their relationship. Since they had decided to sell their daughters, the two families naturally would not object to the young master's suggestion. However, this was something that neither of them had expected. This young master's method of nurturing relationships was actually this. Chapter 305. What was even more ridiculous was that the young master's intention was not to kill or capture the two ladies. Once he saw that they could not hold on any longer, he would order them to stop the chase. When the other party had more or less recovered, a new round of pursuit would be launched, and this cycle would repeat itself over and over again. Although it would not kill the two ladies, it would definitely make them suffer, entangling them tightly like a nightmare. Rather than calling the whole thing strange, it would be more accurate to say that it was bizarre. It was bizarre to the point of being out of the ordinary. This strange farce of hunting/cultivating relationship happened only when Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan were at the end of their tether and the guards and maids accompanying them were all killed. Only then did they finally receive the message from their clans. The messenger birds sent by the two great families were all hunted down by this so-called young master. When the last bird that escaped the net was finally caught by Ji Lingxi, the two ladies almost fainted from anger when they found out about the whole incident. Knowing that the matter could no longer be hidden, the young master finally showed himself to negotiate with the two ladies. However, the two ladies hated him to the core for all the tricks he had played on them. How could they agree to the absurd marriage of two ladies serving the same husband? Therefore, the two ladies continued their escape while the young master continued his pursuit, maintaining the same pace as before. I won't let a single person who appears around you get away. Only the two of you will not be killed or severely injured. The stalemate continued, reverting to the cat and mouse game from before. I won't kill you, I'm not in a hurry to capture you, but I won't let you go either. Let's see who can last longer in the end. The strangeness and inexplicability of this incident was the most bizarre in the world. The two ladies had never lacked suitors due to their stunning looks, but they had never seen one like this. Sister Lan, what is going on? Ji Lingxi was sweating profusely as she panted. Even if it's a marriage proposal, even if it's a forced marriage, why did that person use such a method? Yu Rulan was perplexed as well. Her leg had been broken when she was escaping, so she could only be carried by Ji Lingxi. Fortunately, both of them knew the truth and were at least relieved, no longer in such a hurry to escape. If he was tired, he would simply rest on the spot. Although the other party seemed to have been stopping them from escaping to Tiantang City with a mysterious motive, it was also a fact that he had not killed them. For now, they could only seal off their way to Tiantang City. However, it was precisely because of this that the two women were even more confused. I can't figure it out no matter how I think about it. Yu Rulan shook her head, troubled. Since he's given a betrothal gift to our family, he must be interested in something about us. Is it our looks? But I don't remember seeing this person before. A person who does things like this must be ostentatious in his daily actions. If I had encountered him, I'd have a deep impression of him, Ji Lingxi said in distress. I probably haven't seen him before. Yu Rulan said, with his way of doing things, if we'd seen him earlier, I'm afraid he would have made his move long ago instead of waiting until now. Don't forget how long we've been out. He must have found out about our situation during the time we were out traveling, that's why he did what he did today. However, if he hasn't even seen us before this, then isn't what he's doing a little too unusual? Ji Lingxi was getting more and more perplexed. What he's doing is illogical. Think about it, a person who really intends to propose would not use such a method to woo someone. How is this cultivating feelings? This is obviously tormenting someone to insanity. Yu Rulan frowned. Yes, our family has agreed to his proposal and accepted his betrothal gift. The order of our parents and the matchmaker's gifts are all in place. Even if we're unwilling, it's a done deal. Both of us can even be considered part of his family now. Ji Lingxi replied, although we definitely won't agree to this marriage, He won't be sure of our attitudes at all before he meets us. With his generosity and wealth, I'm afraid there are plenty of people who want to marry him. So, his so-called chasing after women and nurturing feelings are already illogical actions in and of itself? Then, he played the cat and mouse game with us. He chased us for tens of thousands of miles and killed all the people around us. How could he have the slightest intention of asking for our hand in marriage? Yu Rolan frowned. But since he's done this and gone to such lengths, there must be a reason. Ji Lingxi said, such an incomprehensibly crazy behavior, there must be a reason why they did it after giving the betrothal gift. If there isn't a reason, why would they go to such lengths? If they really wanted to capture us, we would have been captured and brought back by now. But what is the reason for doing this? This was a big headache for him. No matter how you look at it, this shouldn't be happening. As the two women fled, they discussed and pondered over and over again, but in the end, they didn't have the slightest clue. After a long and repetitive conversation, they could only come to one conclusion: the other party must have an important purpose. Otherwise, no other reason could explain such a crazy action. Swoosh, 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 a group of men dressed in black appeared once more. Tiny hidden weapons that were as dense as rain danced in the air. Faced with such a familiar dangerous situation, the two girls could only choose to run again. They could only feel their teeth itching. This wasn't the first time they were in a situation like this. Although their lives weren't in danger, they still had other concerns. The hidden weapons they were facing right now wouldn't pose a threat to their lives, but it was a huge taboo to their appearance. A slight carelessness and they would be disfigured. The thing that a woman treasured the most had always been her looks, especially beautiful women. This was especially true for beautiful women. They cherished their looks more than they cherished their lives. Therefore, they could only choose to continue fighting and running. Ha 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 ha, arrogant laughter came from the forest on the other side. A young man dressed in green had a triumphant smile in his eyes as he watched the two girls flee in panic. His laughter grew more and more carefree. He was like a confident cat playing with a mouse between its paws. Bastard! Ji Lingxi's clear voice that was filled with hatred came from afar. Ha ha ha, the young man chuckled in delight once more, as if he was responding to Ji Lingxi's insult. Beside the young man was a thin, sinister-looking old man. The old man observed the two girls' mental state and said softly, "Young lord, these two girls are not to be trifled with. Their temperament is tenacious and their personality is steady. For someone of their age, they are truly outstanding. It is something this old servant has never seen in my life." The young man chuckled. If not, why would it be worth us making such a big fuss? Judging from the current situation, I'm afraid we'll need a long time to achieve the situation we want, said the old man. It's all right. I have patience now. This hunting game is fun. The young man had a smile on his face. Pass down my order. Be careful not to tire them to death. After chasing for a while more, let them break out of the encirclement. Also, give them some time to find something to eat. Don't let my little beauties starve to death. Sigh, these two people are really too stubborn. We sent them food, but they refused to eat. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this trouble. Yes. It's estimated that we'll be able to achieve our goal in another 2 months. The young man watched Ji Lingxi's agile figure as she fled with Yu Rolan on her back and praised, "This daughter of the Ji family is the most talented in this world. She must have broken through 3 major levels in this continuous pursuit, haven't she?" The black-robed old man replied, "That's right. She's already at the 8th peak now. Young lord, if it weren't for the fact that this girl is of great help to your cultivation and is hard to give up, I'm afraid she would be a target for those old monsters to fight over just based on her talent alone." The young man's eyes were half-lidded as he said, "This talent alone is definitely outstanding even in the bound of universe. Come to think of it, what use do I have for her if she doesn't have such talent?" "You're right, young lord." "Right, did you catch the monkey beside the girl?" asked the young man. That 1,000 illusion monkey is unusually agile and possesses the ability to transform and hide. We've lost track of it a long time ago and it's impossible to capture it. It's long gone by now, but the monkey is still in its infancy and only has its natural instincts. It hasn't developed any further intelligence and won't cause any more variables. The old man lowered his head. That might not be the case. Variables are never certain. A little monkey might be able to create a variable. It's just that with its current level of spiritual consciousness, it won't be able to explain the current situation clearly even if it goes to get reinforcements, will it? As the young man spoke, a mocking smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The black-robed old man chuckled as well. Even if there's a chance and reinforcements really come, what kind of reinforcements can there be in the entire Tianxian continent that can scare us? Even their families have given up on them, let alone the others. The young man smiled playfully and said, "Actually, I'm really looking forward to the arrival of reinforcements now. I guess the person who's coming is probably the only hope to maintain their fighting spirit and perseverance. If we kill all of their reinforcements right in front of them, do you think we'll achieve our goal earlier?" The black-robed old man's eyes brightened. "Young lord, that's a brilliant plan." He suddenly came to a realization. Young master, when that monkey escaped, young master was not far away. With that young monkey's insignificant cultivation, how could it escape from young master's eyes? Could it be that young master had already made up his mind from then on? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He praised, "Young lord, you're really far-sighted and far-sighted." Chapter 306. The young man said faintly, "I'm only guessing about this. I can't be sure that the other party has other reinforcements. Even their own families won't come to their aid. How many connections can the two young ladies have by themselves? What kind of powerful help can they have? As for letting that monkey go, whether it's useful or not, it's still an additional opportunity. Variables can be beneficial to others or beneficial to oneself. Let's wait for time to prove it." "Yes. Sister Lan, we've broken out of the encirclement once again. We have a short time to rest." Ji Lingxi gritted her teeth. "That bastard must have purposely let us go." Yu Rolan said weakly, "No matter what, it's a good thing that we're out." "Lingxi, your monkey, how many days has it been since he left?" Ji Lingxi replied, "It's been 4 days. He should be in Tiantang City by now." "Sigh, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I have a feeling that this will implicate him. That person's actions are perverse, but his ability is even more formidable. Even if he comes, will it be of any use?" Yu Rolan said softly, "We're out of ideas now that things have come to this. We can only pin our hopes on this one and only hope. If we don't do this, it'll be an extravagant hope for us to even last until this point. If even our hearts break down, then there'll really be no hope left. Also, I hope that I can leave you with some inspiration. No matter what the situation is, no matter how hopeless life is right now, there's still a chance to meet." Yu Rolan spoke in a low voice, a glint of sadness flashing across her eyes. Ji Lingxi was troubled. If Yun Yang really came to save her, it would definitely be a good thing for both of them. However, these people were exceptionally valiant. How could Yun Yang be their opponent with his cultivation base? He would only be sending himself to his death if he came. In spite of this, if Yun Yang completely ignored her pleas for help and did not come to save her, Ji Lingxi would be filled with despair. "Sister Lan, do you think that I'm conflicted?" Ji Lingxi sighed. "I'm hoping that he'll come, but I'm also hoping that he won't. If he comes, my heart will ache, but if he doesn't, I'll be filled with despair." Yu Rolan smiled faintly. "He will definitely come." Ji Lingxi's eyes brightened. "If he really comes, how can we ensure his safety?" Yu Rolan said slowly, "Where there is a will, there will always be a way." "What is it?" asked Ji Lingxi. Yu Rolan did not speak, remaining silent instead. "Naturally, there was a way. I will appear and feign civility. I will first use myself as the price to let you go. If it really doesn't work, I'll die in front of them, using my death to exchange for your lives. Since he wants to marry me, he can't really force me to my death, right? That way, as long as you have a bit of buffer time, you can think of a way to escape or something else. And that is the only thing I can fight for you. It was also under such circumstances that the two of them could truly be together. Truly, obtain happiness. Although it may not be very long, it ultimately depends on how you do it, but how could she say her thoughts out loud? Let's go look for something to eat up ahead. Ji Lingxi rubbed her tummy, a troubled expression on her face. I'm starving. Yu Rulan smiled. Let's go then. Let's take advantage of the time this devil has given us to rest and reorganize ourselves. Ji Lingxi carried Yu Rulan on her back and stepped swiftly into a small village ahead. Although they knew that both of them had a certain amount of time to rest, they dared not linger. If they stayed too long in the small village, they would bring disaster to the peaceful village. They had experienced something similar before. They've entered the small village? The young man stood on the treetop of a big tree on the hilltop, looking at the small village where smoke was rising from the chimneys. His voice was soft and ethereal. Yes. According to their habits, I'm afraid they'll prepare 7 to 10 days worth of food this time, the young man said. When they come out and fight each other, you must be careful not to spoil their food. It won't be fun if they fight us on an empty stomach. Yes. Less than the time it took to burn an incense stick later, Ji Lingxi sneaked out from the other side of the small village at the foot of the hill with Yu Rulan on her back. They're out. Young lord, should we chase after them and kill them? The young man watched calmly and said faintly, there's no need to be so forceful. Give them some time to recover. Try to create the illusion that they've escaped the encirclement and are safe. Wait until they feel completely safe and let down their guard before you strike. Only then can you strike their confidence and spirit to the greatest extent. Young lord is wise. The dark clouds in the sky grew thicker. The northern wind seemed to be frozen as it blew weakly. Small flakes of snow began to fall. The first snow of the year was about to arrive. Yin Yang, who had received the message that Ji Lingxi was in danger, had rushed over anxiously. Ji Lingxi was his 8th brother's younger sister, which meant that she was Yun Yang's own younger sister. Her safety was more than enough to take precedence over everything else. There was also Yu Rulan, his 8th brother's fiancée and his own 8th sister-in-law. Yin Yang had to rush over as fast as he could when both of them were in danger. The wind howled as a white cloud sped through the sky in an unusual manner. Hard snowflakes hammered into the clouds. It was a sign that a heavy snow was about to fall. Tianxian continent called such a phenomenon snowball. If one were to look up from the ground, all one could see would be a sea of white. Yin Yang turned into the wind and sped to the rescue. He had been on the road for a whole day, but he had yet to arrive. Yin Yang was extremely thankful that he had gifted Ji Lingxi a treasured saber back then and had infused the mystical qi of the endless divine art into the saber's spirituality, facilitating the fate between Ji Lingxi and the saber. Seeing the 1,000 illusion monkey appear before him covered in wounds, Yun Yang's first feeling was that his heart was about to explode. Ji Lingxi was his 8th brother's younger sister. Yu Rulan was his 8th brother's fiancée. Something had just happened to Yun Zuyu. Before he could confirm what was going on and if there was a chance for a turnaround, Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan had already received an alarm. Could it be that the heavens could not bear to see the 9 supremes doing well? Yin Yang was infuriated, his heart trembling with anxiety. He did not even have the time to inform the others before he swept the 1,000 illusion monkey up and sped in the direction the monkey had pointed. It took only a blink of an eye for him to be out of Tiantang City. It was only then that he realized that Whitey 2, Whitey 3, and Whitey 4 were sleeping on him. It seemed like he had left in too much of a hurry, so he didn't realize that the Whiteys were still clinging to him due to inertia, and they were still there. The oncoming cold air caused the 3 Whiteys to tremble and open their eyes. Meow, the three whiteys were dumbfounded by the current situation. How did they end up in the air when they woke up? Could they be flying now? Why was it so cold? And what were these white things that were floating in the air? Master, slow down, Whitey is so cold, meow. The thousand illusion monkey widened its eyes, allowing its red buttocks to be chilled by the wind to the point of being frozen. Its face, however, was filled with human-like anxiety. It had been such a long time. How was its master? Ji Lingxi was already feeling helpless and hopeless. There was almost no interruption in the battle. Hidden weapons were constantly aimed at her face. Ji Lingxi could only defend with all her might and fight with all her might. She mustered every ounce of energy she had and squeezed every ounce of energy out of her to contend with the enemy. If these people had only wanted to kill her, she might have given up a long time ago. If she could just end her life right now, it would not be a bad thing for her. However, these bastards actually wanted to disfigure her. How could they tolerate this? Being toyed with like this, it was exhausting. No matter how indignant she was, the feeling of being physically and mentally exhausted was too much to bear. Be it a marriage proposal or a forced marriage, why did they have to hunt us down? It would have been fine if they only wanted to kill us, but why did they have to disfigure us again and again? Ji Lingxi mumbled as she ran. Could it be that this bastard is not only a pervert? His preferences are even more perverted, and he likes disfigured women? Yu Rulon rolled her eyes on her back. How should she put it? She believed that the other party's real goal was not to disfigure them. The so-called disfigurement attacks were probably just a method to continue pressuring them, a process to further destroy their will. They must have another goal, and it must be something big. It was just that they had yet to figure it out. This girl is really resilient. The young man looked at Ji Lingxi, who was still running with all her might. Her potential is amazing. The black-robed elder beside him said with a solemn gaze, "Congratulations, young lord. From what we can see now, this girl's will has yet to crumble despite being in such a state. Be it her endurance or her temperament, they are all top-notch. Young lord, the benefits you will reap will far exceed our initial estimation." The young man nodded slowly and said, "I think so too. This effort is worth it. What a small investment." Along with the passage of time, the snowflakes in the sky became denser and denser. The young man raised his head to take a look and said, "This girl is becoming more and more slippery. The snow is about to arrive, so we can't allow her to take advantage of the snow to escape. If she really escapes, then all the preparations we've made would have been in vain." The black-robed elder nodded. "I understand. Nothing must go wrong." The old man agreed, but in his heart, he was thinking, young master never cared about the possibility of his prey escaping. But this time, he made an exception for this woman. From this, it could be seen that young master cared about this woman to the point of worrying about personal gains and losses. Then, the target this time really couldn't be lost. "Everyone, come closer. Close all the gaps in the encirclement." The heavy snow finally began to fall from the sky. "Humph, my wife bought so many grapes and ate them one by one in front of me, knowing that my stomach doesn't taste good. She knows I'll have diarrhea if I eat grapes. Is she trying to frame me?" Chapter 307. In just a short quarter of an hour, the ground was already covered in a silvery white color. After another hour, even the surrounding mountain ridges were covered in a vast expanse of white. That girl is really quite scheming. She made use of the weather to seek a turning point. The black-robed old man smiled in admiration. She actually hid somewhere. Both of them changed into white clothes. The young man smiled amusedly and said, "At this moment, when the snow has just covered the land and the surrounding environment has changed, she immediately reacted and thought of changing into white clothes, using the snow as a cover, hoping to escape by a fluke. Looks like this girl's willpower is really amazing. I'm afraid she can still hold on for more than a month." The black-robed old man smiled. "This is good news. The longer she can hold on, the greater the reward for young master. The young man narrowed his eyes and smiled. Naturally, the longer she can hold on, the better. If she can hold on for another year from now, I think the chaotic pure een she will be able to obtain would be enough for her to look down on the current generation and become the most respected in the universe. The black-robed old man laughed loudly, obviously agreeing with the young man's words. The young man's laughter suddenly stopped. He suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. He frowned and said, "Why is there such a strong wind all of a sudden?" Everyone around the young man also raised their heads to look, trying to figure out what was going on. The howling of the wind in the air was getting louder and louder. The falling snowflakes were also getting fiercer and fiercer. When the wind blew on their faces, it actually felt like they were being cut by a small knife. The accumulated snow on the ground in front of them also gradually flew up with the wind. After a while, the flying snow covered everyone's vision. The snowfall actually became unprecedentedly strong. Not good. The young man furrowed his brows. In this kind of weather, wearing white clothes is really advantageous. Don't let those two girls take the opportunity to escape. Hurry. Unexpectedly, before the young man could finish his words, the wind in the air actually increased again, becoming even stronger. Following a sudden sound, it was as if there were thousands of people roaring at the same time. The surroundings were actually like the roar of a tsunami. All the trees in the entire forest also bent down in unison. Immediately after, the snow that covered the mountains and plains suddenly flew up at the same time. This time, it wasn't as simple as blocking one's vision. No matter how good one's eyesight was, one wouldn't be able to see their own fingers in front of them. Oh no! The young man roared in anger. His body flickered as he flew against the wind. His entire body was like a sharp blade, slicing apart the biting cold northern wind. A moment ago, Yun Yang, who had rushed over from afar, looked down at the forest from the sky. He saw Ji Lingxi, who was carrying Yu Rulan on her back, running for her life in a flustered manner, and his eyes widened in anger. The blood stains on the two girls, their pale faces, and the way they struggled to survive were like a knife stabbing into Yun Yang's heart. Just as Yun Yang was about to make his move, he unexpectedly sensed a strong aura emanating from the forest. Although Yun Yang was furious, he tried his best to control himself. The more it's like this, the more I can't lose my temper. The opponent's ability isn't clear now. Nothing can be done with a moment of impulse. It's fine if I just lose my life, but eighth sister-in-law and Lingxi's lives are also in my hands now. Although the thousand-soul monkey was intelligent, it was still a cub after all. Its deific consciousness had yet to be awakened. Although it could warn and guide the way, it could not tell Yun Yang everything that had happened. In Yun Yang's opinion, although Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan were in danger, their opponent might not be too strong. After all, when he had parted ways with Ji Lingxi, her cultivation base was only at the 5th peak. Now that not much time had passed, even if Ji Lingxi had a breakthrough, her improvement would still be limited. If there was still room for maneuver with such a level of ability, then their opponent could not be considered a formidable force. It was because of such calculations that Yun Yang did not have the time to consider what he should do when Ji Lingxi's opponent was so strong that Yun Yang could not handle it. Now, however, Yun Yang was shocked to realize that not only did the opponent's ability far exceed his estimation, it was so high that he could not handle it at all. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and quietly turned into the northern wind. There's more than one cultivator's aura, and any one of them is far above mine. Furthermore, 2 of their auras seem to be on par with Ling Xiaozui's. It's only a sliver away from Ling Xiaozui's aura that I had sensed the other day. Who is this person? How can he be so strong? Hiss. After carefully analyzing the opponent's combat power, Yun Yang was stunned by his own judgment. How could there be such a terrifying aura at this time and place? An expert of this level? What was even more inconceivable was that they were hunting Ji Lingxi down. Since there was such a terrifying expert here, how could the 2 of them not be taken down after such a long time? There was definitely a conspiracy. How many experts in this world could there be who were at the level of the person in front of them? From what Yunyang knew, there were only 4 to 5 people who were at this level. Ling Xiaozui was one, Du Guchou, who was a legend, was naturally one. Mr. Nian was the Four Seasons Tower's mastermind, so of course, he was one. The last one was Jun Moyan, whose name he only knew. Yunyang really did not know much more than that, he had not even heard of their names before. Now that there were 2 of them, Yunyang could not help thinking, could this be the Four Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian? Who is the other one? If the Four Seasons Tower had 2 such experts at the same time, they could have killed Ling Xiaozui together. With the Four Seasons Tower's manpower, resources, and capability, it would be a piece of cake to set up a trap for Ling Xiaozui. This should be a problem for the Four Seasons Tower or Ling Xiaozui to consider, it has nothing to do with me. However, no matter who the person below is, he is a formidable character that cannot be defeated. To Yunyang, the forest was a place where he could be in extreme danger at any time. However, no matter how dangerous it was, Yunyang would never allow Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan to be captured right under his nose. Even if it meant risking his life, he would not hesitate. The wind whistled. It seemed that the black-robed elder below and the young man with a handsome face and relaxed demeanor were the culprits. My plan now should be, he pondered for a moment, and then he made up his mind. He had been cultivating the manifestation transfiguration during this period of time and had improved greatly. It was time to verify it now. In the next moment, the gale in the sky intensified by more than 10 times. The accumulated snow on the mountain flew into the sky along with the sudden gale. Heaven and earth were shrouded in a blur. At the same time, a tornado formed from the sky to the ground and charged downwards like a raging dragon. The young man on the other side reacted swiftly as well. Just as the change occurred, his silhouette was already flying over like a sharp arrow piercing through the clouds. The young man could tell at a glance that the tornado that was charging downwards like a raging dragon was man-made. He roared, "Who is it? How dare you disrupt this young lord's plan?" In spite of this, the tornado that had appeared out of nowhere ignored his words. With a gust of wind, it wrapped Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan's delicate bodies and sprung up from the ground, retreating hastily. Yunyang knew that he only had this one chance, judging from the other party's ability. Therefore, he did not hesitate to wrap the 2 girls up and retreat at once. Stay! The young man's body that was moving horizontally turned abruptly and soared into the sky against the strong northern wind. A hand abruptly stretched out from his sleeve. It was ink black in color. He grabbed out and roared, "Stay here!" With this grab, a black hole suddenly appeared even in the snow that filled the sky. Any spiritual chi of heaven and earth was blocked outside the black hole. Yunyang could feel the other parties lock on him. He had absolutely no power to resist this grab. The attack was swift, about to destroy the tornado and end his life. Yunyang could feel the other party's gaze locked onto him. He had absolutely no power to resist this grab. Yunyang's mind raced as a clap of thunder resounded in the air. How could there be a sudden clap of thunder in the middle of winter when the sky was filled with snow? Not only that, there was even lightning accompanying it. The young man was taken aback for a moment. A bolt of lightning twisted in the sky like a shining silver snake, striking down from the sky and striking the young man's right hand that was as black as ink with unusual precision. A loud boom resounded. The force of the grab vanished into thin air. Humph! Smoke rose from his right hand that was struck by the lightning. The young man retracted his right hand at once, but his other hand followed with an even more violent grab. With a light crack, he actually clawed out a black hole in the air. It was obvious that he was enraged after being struck by the lightning. His subsequent attack was fueled by anger and humiliation. However, in that split second where the lightning struck, the tornado had already taken advantage of the gap to rise 1,000 feet into the sky. It was still rising, and the distance between them had already increased. No matter how powerful the young man's second attack was, it was all for naught. At this time, a sonorous dragon roar suddenly sounded out, and a ray of light flashed rapidly below. A magnificent sword light and a black-clothed figure surged with sword chi that soared into the sky and instantly soared up to 1,000 feet into the sky. It was the black-robed elder who was wielding his sword to intercept the tornado in the sky. The sword struck with the tempest of thunder. The sword hovered 1,000 feet in the sky like a dragon. Where do you think you're going? Yin Yang was shocked once again. The tornado that he had turned into sped up once more, trying his best to evade the attack. However, as the sword swept past, the tornado that was like a long dragon was cut in half. Chapter 308. Yin Yang felt a heart-wrenching pain as the purplish-golden liquid that had accumulated in his dantian vanished at once. His soul was shaken as well, and a sense of absent-mindedness rose within him. He had almost escaped from the range of his wind manifestation and plummeted from the sky. The force of the black-robed elder's sword was aimed directly at his soul, destroying it and destroying his soul. Yin Yang was currently a combination of wind, cloud, and thunder. Half of his manifestation was wind, the other half cloud, and a sliver of his deific consciousness as lightning. His deific consciousness and soul were thus divided into 3 parts of different sizes. The tornado was only formed by half of Yin Yang's cultivation base. Otherwise, the sudden slash would have been enough to split Yin Yang into 2, just like how the tornado had split him into 2. Even so, Yin Yang was still severely injured, and his soul was severely damaged. After all, the tornado's manifestation had been cut in half by the person's sword. The injury was extremely severe. Yin Yang forcefully activated the endless divine art while Emmy continuously supplied the air of vitality from afar, barely holding on. He mustered all the remaining energy in his body for one last fight. The tornado finally soared into the sky with a boom. The elder's sword force had been exhausted, he could not strike again in time. With a howl, the tornado soared into the sky and sped away. In the sky above, a white cloud leisurely flew over, supporting the soaring tornado. It continued to rise, and in the blink of an eye, it had already reached a height of several hundred feet, pierced through the dark clouds that were currently snowing, and then disappeared without a trace. Silence reigned. The black-robed elder descended slowly from 1,000 feet in the sky, his eyes filled with shock. The young master on the ground also widened his eyes as he looked up at the dark clouds in the sky. His eyes were filled with shock. Who was this person? What kind of cultivation method was this? The two of them had tried their best to intercept the tornado, and it was enough to move mountains and fill up the seas. However, it seemed like the tornado was not affected at all. At the very least, from the surface, it seemed that the other party had left in a relaxed manner. What kind of cultivation method is this? Why is it so strange? The young master blurted out. This. The black-robed old man laughed bitterly. I've never seen it before. I've never even heard of it. The young master frowned and said, That's a person? The black-robed old man's face was solemn. He remained silent for a long time. That tornado was man-made, and the person who did it was a part of the wind and clouds. There was no doubt about that. But what kind of person could completely transform into the wind manifestation? Not even a trace of flesh. Although his attack just now had only cut off half of the tornado, with the methods that the other party had displayed, the entire tornado should have been formed from his body, and cutting off half of it should have cut off part of his body. Why was it that only profound energy leaked out and did not really injure his body? This kind of cultivation technique was shocking and terrifying. At the same time, it was a little too strange. With the old man's rich experience, among all the wondrous techniques that he knew of, there were definitely quite a few that could transform one's body into wind and lightning in a short period of time. However, the so-called wind and thunder transformation was just a saying. Because no matter how dazzling the person who performed the technique was, no matter how much he looked like wind and lightning, his body still existed. If the other party aimed at his real body and cut it off, then the so-called wind and thunder transformation would just be a joke. But what happened just now was clear. Someone had descended from the sky in the form of the wind. He had never revealed his true body. He had directly swept up the two women in the form of a tornado, and then directly soared into the sky. Even when he was dismembered by the sword, only a portion of his profound energy dissipated. Not only was his real body not damaged, he didn't even reveal himself. How could that not make the young master and the old man feel inexplicably shocked and horrified? I didn't expect these two girls to have such strong reinforcements. The young master took a deep breath and said, "No wonder they kept persevering and waiting for help. They never gave up. So that's why." He frowned and said, "Since there's such a person in the way, then all our previous arrangements are going to be for naught. Even if we find him in the future, how can we fight against such a legendary expert?" Other than the disappointment in his tone, there was also a sense of fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Despite the strong reluctance in his heart, he had already accepted his fate and did not want to complicate things further. Such a method was almost incomprehensible. Was it not courting death to go against such a person? "Young master, I'm afraid there's something fishy about this. There might be a turning point." The black-robed old man thought about it and said, "From what I see, our arrangements might not be ineffective." The young master's face was dark as he said, "Oh? What do you mean?" Although this old servant was shocked by the manifestation that person displayed just now, I secretly think that, if this person really has the cultivation base that young master thinks he has, then, to put it bluntly, since this person is friends with Ji Lingxi and Yu Rolan, how can he let the two ladies be bullied by young master like that? The black-robed old man said. That does make sense. The young master said worriedly, what if this person comes to seek revenge? What should we do? With such an elusive peerless expert, our family. Young master, you've misunderstood me. That's not what this old servant meant. The black-robed old man said with a hunched back, this old servant meant that, if he really had such capability just now, he should have killed all of us. Based on the methods we've seen and the incomprehensible meteorological manifestation cultivation method, it has long surpassed the level of this continent. It shouldn't be difficult for him to kill us. Even if his goal was to save the two ladies, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill us after that. But he didn't do so. The black-robed old man said, not only did he not, he didn't show himself from the beginning until the end. This is too unusual for such a superb expert. Did he only want to save them? Did he not consider avenging the two ladies at all? This is what this old servant said was unreasonable and strange. Since that person could come all the way here to save them, I believe their relationship must be unusual. Since it's unusual, then as long as he really has super strength, it's only right for us to kill him and take his life. But he didn't do that. And it's not that he didn't want to, but he couldn't. He couldn't. Besides that, there's another strange thing. The fight just now was only for a moment, and their understanding of each other was quite limited. But from the beginning to the end, the other party gave this old servant a feeling that he was in a hurry, as if he came in a hurry and left in a sorry state. It was this kind of feeling. It was definitely not the feeling of looking down on us, acting casually or disdainfully. The young master listened to the black-robed old man's analysis seriously. Then, he interrupted the old man's words and kept making him repeat. The more he listened, the brighter his eyes became, and the fear hidden in his eyes became fainter. And that tornado, although it looked terrifying, to us, it didn't have any real destructive power. At least, its power was very different from what we expected. It was insignificant. If the other party was really a peerless expert and had such a wonderful cultivation method, he could have used the tornado to kill all of us. It wouldn't be difficult. At least, if we were in his shoes, we definitely wouldn't let go of someone who bullied and humiliated our family to such a degree. So, this old servant's judgment on this matter is, although the cultivation method used by the other party is strange and mysterious, it's either because the other party's cultivation base is too shallow or it's not enough. In short, it's only for bluffing. If it's really used to kill the enemy, it's just so. So, the other party's purpose should be to save people. Judging from the fact that he came in a hurry and fled in a sorry state after saving people, it's possible that the other party doesn't have no evil intentions towards us. It's just that he doesn't have the strength to do so. The black-robed old man said, to the Tianxian continent, our family hasn't stepped foot in the mortal world for a very long time. We don't know what specific changes have happened in this continent, but if this old servant's guess is true, and such a cultivation method really exists, then the other party is definitely not a nobody in this continent. So, we just need to ask around a little and we'll probably get some news. As long as we have news, we can decide on our next move. The young master nodded as he listened. His face regained a smile and he said, yes. That's right. Even if we confirm that the other party is really an expert that we can't fight against during the process of asking around, or that there are other elders behind the other party who are really super experts, we still have room to maneuver. If it really doesn't work, we can return to our family anytime. As long as we seal the spiritual energy passage, we can still sit back and relax no matter how powerful the other party is. But if... A hint of ruthlessness flashed in the young master's eyes. But if the other party isn't that kind of peerless expert and doesn't have a top expert to back him up? The black-robed old man smiled and said, then, this old servant has to congratulate you, young master. Not only can you regain the Chaos Original Yin, but you can also obtain a superb cultivation method that's unparalleled in the bound of universe. Exactly. Ha 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 ha. The snow continued to fall. Between heaven and earth, even the mountains seemed to have lost their ups and downs, leaving only a vast expanse of whiteness. In a small town not far from that forest, the black-robed old man and the young master were sitting in a tavern, listening attentively to the chatter. The snow had sealed off the mountain and the roads were blocked. Other than the martial world experts who were skilled and bold, ordinary people could only look for inns and taverns nearby to stay away from the snow. As a result, all the inns and restaurants within the area covered by the heavy snow were packed to the brim. With the current situation, it was extremely easy to obtain information. Oh. The 9 Supremes Lords actually have such power? Isn't this the power of a deity? The black-robed old man looked curiously at the drunken fatty who was rambling on. Chapter 309. The fat man snorted and said proudly while wagging his tail, the 9 Supremes Lords are, of course, immortal-like figures. They are also the guardians of the Empire of Yutong. As long as the 9 Supremes Lords are here, Yutong is invincible. His tone was arrogant, as if he was the 9 Supremes Lords himself. However, the 9 Supremes Lords are already. The young lord sighed and said, 8 heroes have fallen in the battle at Tianxian Cliff. Only one is left. It's hard for him to do it alone. How do you know of Lord Supreme Wind's prowess? The fat man looked at the young lord in disdain and said, Lord Supreme Wind's ability is omnipotent. I've seen it with my own eyes. Right above Tiantang City, a tornado that could communicate with heaven and earth. That power was earth-shattering. Many of them knelt down on the spot, almost as if they had seen a deity. Or perhaps, Lord Supreme Wind has already become an immortal. Lord Supreme Wind, tornado. The young lord murmured. Snow was falling outside, but the people inside had nothing to do. Now that they heard someone talking about the 9 Supremes, they were all Yutong's people. Naturally, they were familiar with Yutong's heroes. They came forward and started a heated discussion, one after another. In the crowd, the black-robed elder and the young lord exclaimed in admiration as they listened, glancing at each other from time to time. By now, they had completely understood what was going on. So this was it. Tianxian continent had actually undergone such a change during the time they were not in Tianxian continent. The residence of 9 Supremes. The 9 Heavens dictum. The 9 Supremes. It seemed that the person who had saved Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan was Supreme Wind. There was no doubt about this, no doubt about it. The 9 Supremes having such a phenomenal power is obviously bestowed by the 9 heavens domain. As for the 9 Supremes, they were still annihilated despite having such an ability. It's obvious that the 9 Supremes' true combat power is nothing to be afraid of. Young Lord, this is a rare opportunity. There was a tinge of excitement on the black-robed elder's sinister face. That's right, that's right. We can't miss this heaven-sent opportunity. The young master said slowly, his eyes flashing with light. Currently, we are the only clan that has opened this spiritual energy passage. This time, it was originally only for the young master's cultivation, to search for the innate profound Een and collect the chaos vital Een. The other clans did not know that such a thing existed in the profound sky continent, and because of this, they missed the opportunity to obtain such a mysterious technique. The black-robed old man said, but this matter might not be able to be completed in a short period of time. Especially since Supreme Wind is so mysterious, it's hard for anyone to know his true identity. Now that he's been ambushed, I'm afraid he's even more cautious about concealing his tracks. Our investigation will be fraught with difficulties. If the young master doesn't return after a long time and doesn't show himself for a long time, the other clans will inevitably have suspicions. As long as any clan finds out about this cultivation technique, they will definitely not let it go. At that time, the black-robed old man lowered his voice, his words mixed with a strong hint. What do you mean? The young master smiled playfully. This old servant means. The black-robed old man gritted his teeth, let the others return first. Leave only a few to follow the young master, then seal the spiritual chi passage and create the illusion that the young master has returned. Young master has the heart-soul jade. When the time comes, you only need to activate the heart-soul jade to inform the clan with your utmost vital energy and open the spiritual chi passage temporarily. Then, you can return safely. With such a great effort, I believe the other clans will no longer pay attention to this. When the young master returns, it will be even more secretive. I believe that after a period of cultivation, you can directly claim the top of the rising dragon role. That's right. Speaking of this, the young master's breathing could not help but quicken. He said, with our cultivation base, we should be at the pinnacle of this world in the secular world of the Tianxian continent. As long as we don't provoke the pinnacle experts of this world, the rest of us are mediocre and not worth mentioning. Even if we take 10,000 steps back, if we really want to escape, no one will be able to stop us with our soaring soul escape technique. This plan works. If the young master has made up his mind, this old servant will arrange it right away. It's better to do it as soon as possible. Very well. The young master said decisively, since there's no need to leave a lot of people behind, let's just leave you and me behind. Let the others return and stir up the commotion over there, so that we won't be exposed. Tomorrow morning, we'll go to Tiantang City. Yes. To the young master and the black-robed old man, the mishap had happened right in front of their eyes. They had to adapt to the situation. They were first shocked and then delighted, as if the crisis had turned into a huge opportunity. It was a huge surprise. To Yun Yang, however, it was a series of thrills. From the beginning to the end, he was terrified and terrified. If his mental fortitude had been slightly weaker, he would have been scared to death even if he had not been beaten to death. There was no other reason than that the other party's ability was a little too high, exceeding the upper limit of Yun Yang's mental endurance. The rescue this time, the level he had to endure, as well as the degree of damage he sustained, had even exceeded the time when Han Qing had been severely injured. Yun Yang was in grave danger the moment he made his move. The few whiteys were enraged and were about to charge out. Yun Yang quickly stopped them. With the other party's unfathomable level and terrifying cultivation, even if the whiteys had transcended and advanced in rank, it would still be useless. Not only would it be a futile effort, it would only expose them further, and they might even be completely annihilated here. However, at this moment, he suddenly had an idea. Just like what the young master and the black-robed old man had thought, a crisis could also be an opportunity. The strong enemy before them might be a huge surprise. However, whatever idea it was, it needed to be perfected further. There were too many details to think about. It was better to bring the two girls and the 1,000 illusion monkey back to the residence of Yun as soon as possible. After all, Yin Yang was not in a good state at the moment. Not only had he expended a lot of mystical qi, his cultivation method was flawed due to the black-robed old man's brutal slash. He had to recuperate as soon as possible. Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan, on the other hand, felt an inexplicable sense of peace the moment they were swept up by the tornado. As soon as they relaxed, they fainted. When the two girls woke up and regained consciousness, they realized that they were already lying on a soft, fragrant bed. Where is this? Ji Lingxi scrambled to her feet, her eyes widening in shock. What she saw was very familiar. There was a sword hanging on the wall to the left of the bed, a sword that was purely for decoration, while there was a painting on the other wall opposite the sword. It was a splash ink landscape painting. There was only one place in Ji Lingxi's memory that was so familiar. What's wrong? Yu Rulan asked when she saw that Ji Lingxi was in a daze. She then noticed the abnormality in her body as well. Her injured leg was no longer in pain. Although it still felt awkward and strained to move, the injury on her broken leg was no longer a hindrance. Yu Rulan tried to move it gently and was even more shocked. What's going on? My leg, has it really recovered? Ji Lingxi was startled by Yu Rulan's words. Shock was written all over her face as she said, This is my room. Yu Rulan was shocked as well. What? You're saying that we're in your main residence's bedroom? Ji Lingxi answered, No, this isn't my main residence, this is my. As she spoke, she blushed and said, This was my private room when I stayed in the residence of Yun. Yu Rulan did not have the time to laugh at her. She was even more shocked. Residence of Yun? You're saying that this is the residence of Yun? Yin Yang's residence of Yun? Absolutely. Ji Lingxi stood up, feeling invigorated. She opened the window and took a deep breath, saying, I don't even need to open my eyes to confirm it. I only need to close my eyes and take a deep breath to confirm that this is the residence of Yun. The air here is exceptionally fresh. Yu Rulan was exasperated. This girl was truly hopeless. The air was the same everywhere, especially in a big city like this where the air was the dirtiest. How could it be exceptionally fresh? We've just left the forest, shouldn't it be fresher there? It was obvious that this girl loved the house and its crow, but this was a little too much. She loved the house and its crow too much. Otherwise, how could she have spouted such nonsense and claimed that the air was exceptionally fresh? Lingxi, you're right. How can the air be fresh? It does seem like the air is pretty good, but it's probably because it has just snowed, so the air is a little better. This is to be expected, not necessarily because the residence of Yun's environment is superior. Yu Rulan could feel the freshness of the surrounding air as well, but she did not think too much about it. Ji Lingxi looked out from the window and saw that the entire residence of Yun's courtyard was covered in snow. There were no traces of people walking on the snow. The pavilion at the side of the courtyard looked the same as she remembered, but the top of the pavilion was covered in snow. How could there be green leaves and branches underneath? Even if the snow was sudden and the trees had yet to wither, what was that flower over there? It was obviously a flower that had grown out of the snow tenaciously, blooming with an intoxicating fragrance. It's beautiful. Ji Lingxi sucked in a breath and said, Sister Lan, facts speak louder than words. What you see here has already proven that I'm not lying. I said that this is the most beautiful place in the world. Yu Rulan lay on her side on the bed, holding her head with her right hand as she smiled helplessly. Yes. Wherever Yin Yang is, it's the most beautiful place in the world. I don't doubt this at all. Ji Lingxi was both embarrassed and furious. Sister you know that's not what I meant. You're mocking me on purpose. Chapter 310. It could be seen that Ji Lingxi had completely recovered. Whether it was her mental or physical strength, they had all recovered to a perfect state. The fear that had accumulated in the process of being hunted and escaping had vanished without a trace when she found out where she was. Perhaps, to Ji Lingxi, as long as she was here, everything else was no longer a problem. Peace, comfort, stability, and safety. This girl, you're really heartless. Yu Rulan felt a weight lifted from her heart as she smiled. After going through so much, all of you are finally reunited. Where's your young master Yun? Yu Rulan asked. He's put in a lot of effort to save us this time. We have to thank him properly. Ji Lingxi nodded, blushing as she said, of course. Yu Rulan teased, of course? It's easy for you to say. How can I thank him for such a huge favor? I've been thinking for a long time, but I still can't think of a way to thank him. Why don't you just give yourself to him? Tell young Master Yun directly that there are no words to express my gratitude, I can only give myself to him. Before she could finish, Ji Lingxi covered her mouth in embarrassment and anger. Sister Lan. Stop talking. Yu Rulan begged for mercy. The two girls were in a mess. Knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door. May I come in? Ji Lingxi got up to open the door. Wait. Yu Rulan said anxiously, cover me. Oh, Ji Lingxi replied. Aren't you wearing clothes? Yu Rulan was speechless. At the door. A youth dressed in purple stood with his arms behind his back, looking at the white snow in the courtyard. Looking from the back. The youth was tall, standing against the wind. His hair was as black as ink, his purple robes fluttering in the wind. He stood proudly in the snow-covered land, outstanding and otherworldly. Ji Lingxi could only feel her heart thumping twice. Her mouth felt parched, and she did not know what to say. Yun. Ji Lingxi coughed and said, Yun Yang, was it you who saved us? Yun Yang turned around and said with a smile, it's nothing. Are you all right? Ji Lingxi suddenly felt that something was amiss. How could this piece of wood speak in such a heartwarming tone? Was this still Yun Yang? Where is the Yun Yang who used to tease me? Why was he not used to such a conversation? After a pause, he said, I'm fine, but Sister Lan's leg is a little troublesome. Yun Yang glanced at her and said, don't worry, I've done the initial treatment on Sister Lan's leg. There won't be any sequelae left. She'll be healed in 3 days at most. Here, all troubles are no trouble to me. These words were so domineering. However, it made people feel safe after listening to it. But, Ji Lingxi felt that Yun Yang's gaze was strange. Whether it was when he looked at her or when he stole glances at Sister Lan, his gaze was always odd. It was just like, no matter how hard Ji Lingxi racked her brains, she could not figure out the true meaning behind Yun Yang's odd gaze. However, Yu Rulan could acutely sense the strange intent in Yun Yang's gaze. Yun Yang's gaze was neither covetous nor spying, it was concern and concern. It was just that the concern he had for Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan was different. Yun Yang's gaze towards Ji Lingxi was like a brother looking at his mischievous younger sister whom he had failed to take good care of. His gaze was filled with remorse and indulgence. It was even like a father looking at his youngest daughter whom he had abandoned at a young age and who had returned after 18 years. His gaze was filled with remorse and love. Yes, it was love. Yu Rulan could see this love, but Ji Lingxi could not understand it. Ji Lingxi was born into an adopted family, not a biological one. Naturally, the familial atmosphere between them was not like that of an ordinary family. The affection between family members was foreign to Ji Lingxi, causing her to be confused. In spite of this, Yu Rulan, who understood the feeling, was even more baffled. You think that Lingxi was injured and bullied because you didn't take good care of her. Although the cause and effect is a little far-fetched, it can be used to explain the doting and remorseful look in your eyes. After all, we all know about Lingxi's affection for you. But, what the hell is this kindness? Also, what do you mean by having similar remorse towards me? It's true that Lingxi is related to you, but this is the first time I've met you. Even if you love me, it's barely understandable that you have similar feelings towards me out of pity and remorse for what happened to Lingxi, but so what if you have more respect for me as an elder? Do I look so old that I'm old enough to be your elder? Just as Yu Rolan was pondering, Yun Yang had already walked into the room. Yu Rolan was doubtful, but she forced herself to sit up on the bed. Her eyes were trained on Yun Yang as she said with a smile, "Thank you, young Master Yun, for saving me this time." Yin Yang's gaze grew more complicated as he replied respectfully, "You flatter me. This is what I should do." Yin Yang paused and said, "I've found a few servants. I heard that they serve you well. I've also bought 4 servant girls. They'll be here in a while. Let them take care of you then. Just tell them if you need anything. Don't stand on ceremony, the residence of Yun is your home." Yu Rolan said, "You don't have to be so." Before she could finish her words, Yun Yang continued, "The residence of Yun is your home from now on. Stay here with me. No matter what, it's a little safer here. Besides, we're not strangers. Sister Lan and Lingxi, don't have to worry." The 2 ladies were stunned by Yun Yang's words. Although Yun Yang knew of Yu Rolan's existence, both of them had never officially met before. This was only their first meeting and conversation. Why does it sound so familiar when you're so direct and decisive? We don't seem to be that close, do we? You're acting like the head of a family. What do you mean by everything can be decided with a single word? Besides, how do you know my full name? Ji Lingxi asked in shock. She was very sure. She had told Yun Yang that she was called Ji Ling. She had never mentioned that there was actually a word behind it. Now, however, Yun Yang had called it out in such a familiar and logical manner. He had even called her Lingxi so intimately. What was going on? Yun Yang rubbed his nose and said, "I heard your conversation just now, that's how I know." The 2 girls looked at each other suspiciously. Even so, there was no reason for him to be so familiar with it. At least, the atmosphere was still very strange. However, the 2 girls were intelligent. Despite feeling that something was amiss, they suppressed all their doubts in unison. Yun Yang was obviously unwilling to tell the truth, so they would let him keep the secret. They believed that they would find out when the time came. There was no need to be impatient. As long as they could confirm that Yun Yang had no ill intentions towards them, it would be enough. However, this young Master Yun had a lot of secrets. For example, what was the matter with the tornado that swept the 2 of them away? What kind of miraculous elixir was that broken leg? These were things that could not be explained at the moment. In spite of this, the 2 girls did not ask about it. "Tell me, what happened?" "I intervened directly when the situation was bad, but this isn't over yet. I'm afraid there's a follow-up. I understand the cause and I believe it'll be helpful in the future." Yun Yang asked. This question immediately evoked the strong anger and grievance in the hearts of the 2 women. Ji Lingxi's eyes were spitting fire. "I don't know where this lunatic came from. His actions are all insane, and his manpower and financial resources are even more insane." After that, he recounted everything that had happened earlier, and his words were filled with extreme rage. Yu Rolan, who was standing on the side, did not even have the chance to interject. Everything was spilled out by Ji Lingxi alone. Yu Rolan wanted to stop her from talking about the 2 noble families, not wanting to expose the family scandals, but Ji Lingxi could not care less. She spilled everything without a care. Yin Yang could only feel the rage within him skyrocket. The Ji family. The Yu family. How dare they bully 8th brother's younger sister and fiancé? This was an unforgivable sin. Actually, in terms of the profound Sky Continent's era's background, although the 2 families' way of doing things was unreasonable to the 2 girls, it was the trend of the times and there was nothing wrong with it. Not to mention the fact that the green-clothed young master had done all the necessary formalities and was very sincere in his marriage. The betrothal gifts that the two families could not resist were even more generous. Furthermore, the young lord in green was incredibly powerful and he had guards and attendants of similar capabilities. The two families were not as powerful as him, so how could they dare object? Not to mention that he had given so many resources and benefits. Even if he did not spare a single cent and forcefully married the two girls, the two families would still compromise in the end, even if they were hesitant. The existence of the children of noble families had always been related to the marriage of benefits. It was not just the two girls, or rather, it was not just the two girls. The two girls could only be considered as tragic characters in the era of bad luck. In spite of this, the trend of the times, the background, and the inertia of history did not apply to Yun Yang at all. In Yun Yang's eyes, he was certain that this was a great humiliation, a humiliation that must be pursued to the end. This was probably the difference between his own people and others. To Yun Yang, if eighth brother were still around, he would only be assisting from the side. He would do his part to help out as much as he could. However, now that eighth brother was gone, someone had bullied his younger sister and fiancée. Then, this matter would be his own. Everything else would be shouldered by him, Yun Yang. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.